drink that coffee, please. It's that Greek place, my friend Carly. I wouldn't know how to pronounce it, but where I got this coffee from, it's a Greek place. I think so. It's got a Greek name, so I don't know how to pronounce it. And when I ordered it, I noticed my friend Carly was working there, so well, it wasn't bad. It's not bad. I just not. It could be slightly a bit hotter. But oh, but bad weather's starting to hit now. Where this one go? Also, I just finished reading that book too, so it's easy read. Like it says young readers edition, so it's touchy and heavy, but an easy read. I liked it. Some poetic parts in it, but I'm a bit lost for time. Maybe I should walk around or something. I had too much cigarettes this morning too. Work is that way. There's a guy just sitting there in the car, and it's just, I had my camera out. He's like, what? On his bike. Yeah, see, I just. Oh, fuck. Poor boy. So, I'm like legitimately passing time. So, I've got like half an hour to fucking start work. So, Fuck, I've not walked down this alleyway in ages. Pretty good. Some old boys watching me. Alright. Alright. It wasn't that old bloke, I'll be taking a bit of footage of that. But I don't want to start filming. See, one thing about walking through here, I don't know if it's the front of the people's house. Hey, a whale. Ooh. That was a whale. I forgot to bring my phone charger with me, so probably run out of fucking battery time I get here. So, yeah, the Salvo's where I go to the meetings, it's just over there. So, maybe Alice. Oh. Crawler boy. Yes, he. The guy's driven off, so I'm gonna go take photos of the murals. So he's painting, it's like a steep hill. This guy stacking it there. So, look at that birds and shit. I don't know where, maybe this is, I don't know, North Head or something. Going to skateboard and little girl and other stuff there. Come on. See, look at that, the dogs are bigger than the people. So I know where this is. I wonder if these people are based. There's a guy on a keyboard. St. Matthews. I wonder if they're actually based on anyone. Fucking one, because they're all swimming in the same place. Alright. These people. These people should go get jobs. There's a guy surfing too. I don't know what you guys think, but that painting's so unrealistic. So, is this Smith line that I'm on? But the thing is, I'm a bit lost for time because I've no book to read. Time to pass till I start work. Hey, look, a basketball hoop. Okay, I just noticed this place looks a bit. I don't even go inside, it's fucking abandoned. Next door doesn't, this side does. Fuck, I don't even want to know what happens here during the night. It's abandoned and shit. There's like shit everywhere. Fucking hell. I don't even want to know what's that used for or what goes on. Hey, it's a weird spot though. I can find the creeps and shit for it. Hang around here at night to see if I can actually find weird shit going on. But knowing me, I'll forget and bum around other places and stuff. But yeah. So I'll get this. So I got like 20 minutes left, so I'm gonna walk around the suburbs of Manly. So the suburban side of the side. So where I'm at, it is kind of more the suburban side, and the area that I actually wouldn't mind living in if I was gonna live in Manly, because it's all like a flat area. There's a large portion of Manly that's actually like hilly and all that sort of stuff. So, and I just noticed the public library thing. Oh, and a van's coming my way. So. So there's no, there's books in it, but nothing that I actually want. None of these books interest me. Oh, so maybe I can walk up and see that path. Oh, let's cross the road for nothing. See if I can get a feeling, a public path. So let's see if I get a feeling of where that goes to. So I wouldn't mind actually living around here, but expensive though. Oh, wouldn't be able to tell from here. There is a public path. I don't want to walk up. I can't be fucked. So, public path. But see like a two wild bush turkeys. Oh, chicken. So, another alleyway. But across there, it's the street. You like resumes? No. You don't have to. Almost there. Almost. Somebody's got a parking problem. Alexander Street. So now we're playing the waiting game for I start work. And I'm looking at one shopping trolley from here too. Hang on. That's the shopping trolley right there. I don't know why. And there's Kid City. Some sort of, I don't know what it is. Blind cleaning. really weird, like so obscure blinds. Cleaning blinds. Today's fucked. Like, I'm so fucking busy today. So I funked up today already. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning and I made a mistake. I'm in North Sydney. Kinda underneath the harbour bridge at the moment for those who don't know. So, I thought I was doing a film shoot with Reuben today, but I got it mixed up for this Friday. And I can't do this Friday because I got to work at the cafe because it's Good Friday. So I'm kind of here. So I did bring my camera with me. Just in case. So it's a pain in the fucking ass. So I got so much other shit to do. I'm randomly filming again, so I don't want to be a waste of time. I might do some filming around the harbour bridge, I guess. I don't see any PowerPoints I can use for my phone, so I did bring my phone charge with me a second. But shit happens, so right, since I'm here, I will be doing some filming for that, so who knows. So I'm kind of just standing outside Luna Park. There's the bridge and Circular Quays that way, and I got there, so I also do some talking while I'm doing some videos. So I can't believe I fucked up my day as well. It's no one's fault, it's my own fault. And I've sent my mate Reuben a message not to take this forward. We did say we're supposed to be filming Friday, so not today. So I don't know why today, but it's me. That's some free time, so yesterday was a pain in the ass at work. But I ran into Danielle, which is good. Thirsty already, it's 11 o'clock in the morning. So I'm just doing the same sort of techniques as I was in Manly, but just in a different location. So but you can hear the train. I don't know if you can hear the train. It's good. I haven't been down here in ages, so I may as well enjoy it. Hanging out here. Funny characters. Yeah. I'm gonna take a shit. No idea where the public toilets are either. Zero idea where the toilets are. But maybe I should do that. Find where the toilets fucking are. So I think I see police boats in action. I think it's police. So I point the camera at them. So them two. I think that's something to do with the police, and there's another one there. So I think it's the police, it's military, whatever. There's that shit though. Anyway, I'm gonna go find a public toilet so I can take a shit. Oh, it's towing. The big boat's towing the smaller boat. That's what it's doing. But I don't know who they are though. Conspiracy. Still here, so I don't know how much longer I can be. Outside Mission's Point. I don't want to break the line, but who knows? So I want everyone to know, don't feel bad for me. I bought this on myself. So I'm standing next to Miller Street. And I'm across the road from North Sydney Oval. So I'm glad the kids are having fun playing AFL. So you want to know what the kids are doing AFL? So this day did not go to what I thought it would be. Obviously, so I'm at the bus stop. Like, traffic's gonna be annoying. Shit. I'm waiting for the bus.
Radio Free Maine presents Noam Chomsky, speaking on education and democracy, March 28, 1995, Michigan State University, recorded for Radio Free Maine by Roger Leisner. We now join Sheldon Axler as he introduces Noam Chomsky.
Noam Chomsky is the most influential linguist ever. His work in linguistics, philosophy, and psychology have brought him many honors and awards, including the 1989 Kyoto Prize and the Distinguished Scientific Contribution Award of the American Psychological Association. He is a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and of the National Academy of Sciences. According to the Arts and Humanities Citation Index, Noam Chomsky is the 8th most cited source in scholarly papers in the arts and humanities. Others in the top 10 include Shakespeare, Marx, and Freud, but no living person is cited as frequently as Noam Chomsky. In addition to his distinguished career as a linguist, Noam Chomsky is, in my opinion, the most perceptive and important dissident political analyst in the United States. His accurate and incisive writings during the American-Vietnamese War helped fuel one of the largest anti-war movements in history. While most critics base their opposition on the war to its supposed unwinnability, Chomsky's stance was based on a principled opposition to aggression, including American aggression. Liberal critics wrote that the war arose from a series of errors and misunderstandings. Noam Chomsky's brilliant historical analyses exposed the real motives behind American foreign policy. His electrifying 1967 book, American Power and the New Mandarins, was dedicated, quote, to the brave young men who refused to serve in a criminal war. Noam Chomsky's political activities earned him an honored place on President Nixon's enemies list. As Chomsky began writing about other aspects of American foreign policy, his voice became rare in American mass media. For example, the ideas and facts between Chomsky's scathing critique of our government's support for Israel do not receive coverage in the respectable organs of political reporting. Chomsky countered with a string of dazzling books analyzing our political culture, our foreign policy, and our mass media. I especially recommend his books, The Political Economy of Human Rights, Towards a New Cold War, The Fateful Triangle, the U.S., Israel, and the Palestinians, Turning the Tide, The Culture of Terrorism, Manufacturing Consent. By the way, that's also the title of a film made by the National Film Board of Canada about Noam Chomsky and the mass media. Some of you may have seen it at the Odeon Theater here in town. Continuing with the list of Chomsky's books that I found most interesting, Necessary Illusions, Deterring Democracy, Year 501, The Conquest Continues, World Orders, Old and New, and my personal favorite among the recent books, Rethinking Camelot, JFK, the Vietnam War, and U.S. Political Culture. This evening, Noam Chomsky will be speaking to us on the topic of education and democracy. We will have a question and answer session following the talk. Please welcome Noam Chomsky.
The title of the talk is stolen shamelessly from one of the most outstanding thinkers of the past century, John Dewey, who devoted a good part of his life and thought to the array of issues that fall under those two words. For a good part of his life, he became more skeptical later on, but for most of his life, Dewey seems to have believed that reforms in early education would be in themselves a major lever of social change and would lead the way to a more just and free society, a society, in his words, in which the ultimate aim of production is not production of goods, but the production of free human beings associated with one another on terms of equality. Now, this basic commitment, which runs through his life and work, was profoundly at odds with the leading currents of 20th century social, intellectual life and structure. And those three major dominant currents are fascism, the command societies of Eastern Europe, and the state capitalist industrial societies of the West, the United States included, which are under the effective rule of unaccountable private power. These three systems were similar and have been similar. Two of them were eroded. One is alive and well. They're quite similar in fundamental ways, more so than is commonly believed. Even, in my opinion, even ideologically, actually they grew out of the same intellectual roots. Late 19th century Hegelian ideas about organic entities having rights over and above individuals. It's out of that background that Bolshevism and fascism developed, and also corporations, which are, contrary to what's commonly believed, a pretty modern innovation. They were established in their current form by courts and lawyers, not by legislation, early in this century, and in fact the roots are very similar. There's some interesting recent historical work on this, if you want to look into it, by a leading legal historian, Morton Horowitz, at the Harvard Law School, who's discussed these backgrounds in two recent scholarly books, and it's quite interesting and I think quite correct. These three systems, all deeply authoritarian in fundamental commitments, they are opposed to another tradition, a sort of more libertarian tradition, which goes right back to the Enlightenment, and it included progressive liberals like John Dewey, independent socialists like Bertrand Russell. It included the anti-Bolshevik sectors of the Marxist left, which in fact was the leading element of it up until the Bolshevik Revolution. And of course it included various anarchist currents. It also included a very interesting and largely forgotten popular movement in the not even movement, just popular expression in the United States of the working class press, independent working class press, which existed for quite a long time. It was lively, vibrant tradition. It finally succumbed in the 1950s to unremitting private power with which it couldn't compete. But as late as the 1950s, there were hundreds, maybe 800 or so labor newspapers, still reaching 20 or 30 million people, also radio stations and some television, but advertising pressure and capital resources just drove them off. Same thing happened in England about 10 years later. If you go back to the 19th century and the early 20th century, it was roughly on the scale of the private capitalist press. Very lively, very interesting and independent and mostly forgotten, but real in the real world. These traditions, I think, there is, I think, a direct line from the Enlightenment right through classical liberalism, right into these various directions. And I think it stands opposed to the absolutist currents that have reigned pretty much in the 20th century, those of state socialism and state capitalism, including the rather extreme form of absolutism that's now masked under the phrase conservative, this being terminology that would have, I think, amused Orwell and scandalized Adam Smith. Well, I don't have to stress that this picture that I've very briefly sketched is not precisely the orthodox one, and for that reason alone it should be viewed with skepticism and a critical eye, and that's what I'd recommend. But I would nevertheless like to argue that it has the merit of accuracy, and that if you look at it closely, you'll find that it's true, or so I will try to show. Well, let me return to Dewey's central theme, and again urge that it be taken quite seriously. That is, that the ultimate aim of production is not production of goods, but the production of free human beings associated with one another on terms of equality. The real goal of education, as Bertrand Russell put it, is to give a sense of the value of things other than domination, to help create wise citizens of a free community, to encourage a combination of citizenship with liberty in individual creativeness, which means that we regard a child as a gardener regards a young tree, as something with an intrinsic nature, which will develop into an admirable form given proper soil and air and light. And much as they disagreed on many other matters, as they did, Dewey and Russell, who are certainly two of the leading figures in the intellectual life of the 20th century, they did agree on this humanistic conception, as Russell put it, with its roots in the Enlightenment, which expressed where it was common to express the thoughts in very similar words. The idea that, for example, to cite one British Enlightenment thinker, that that education is not to be viewed as something like filling a vessel with water, but rather as helping a flower to grow in its own way by providing the circumstances in which the normal creative powers will flourish. Dewey and Russell also shared the understanding that these leading ideas of the Enlightenment and of classical liberalism retained their revolutionary character, and if they were implemented, they might indeed produce free human beings whose values are something other than accumulation and domination, rather free association on terms of equality, sharing, and cooperation, participating in equal terms to achieve common goals, democratically conceived, and with only contempt for what Adam Smith denounced as the vile maxim of the masters, all for ourselves and nothing for anyone else, the guiding principle that we are now taught to revere as traditional values have eroded under unremitting attack from absolutist tendencies that have become dominant. Well, it's worth tarrying for a moment to consider just how sharp and dramatic is the clash of values between, on the one hand, the humanistic conception that runs from the Enlightenment right through to 20th century figures like Russell and Dewey, and on the other hand, the prevailing doctrines of today, which are indeed the doctrines that Adam Smith bitterly denounced as the vile maxim of the masters. And were also denounced in pretty much the same terms by the independent popular press, working class mostly press, lively and vibrant working class press of the 19th century, which condemned what it called the new spirit of the age, gain wealth forgetting all but self. That's Smith's vile maxim. It's remarkable to trace the evolution of values from a pre-capitalist thinker like Adam Smith, with his stress on sympathy, on the goal of perfect equality, on the basic human right to creative work, and then on to the present, to those who laud the new spirit of the age, sometimes invoking Smith's name. For example, Nobel Prize-winning economist James Buchanan, who writes in a recent book that what each person seeks is in an ideal situation is mastery over a world of slaves. And it's only if we accept that fundamental principle that we can sort of spin out the rest of economic theory. That's you, in case you didn't notice it. That's something that Adam Smith would have regarded as completely pathological. I think there's no doubt about that. The fact that Smith's name is invoked to present those theses is a sign of the intellectual degeneration of the age, quite apart from what you think about the moral level. The new spirit of the age had to be imposed by force. It wasn't easy to impose. In fact, there's been about a century and a half of struggle to drive it down people's throats, and it hasn't quite made it yet. That fact ought to be familiar from our own history. Unfortunately, it isn't, but it's a major theme of American history, as it was a major theme of the history of England before us. Modern America was created over the protests of its working people, as the distinguished Yale historian, labor historian David Montgomery points out in a recent book quite correctly. And those protests were vigorous and outspoken, in particular in the popular press, which flourished from the early about around 1840, that part of the 19th century, right up to the 1950s. Finally, there's a source that one can look at. It's been very hard to get access to this. The major book on it was published in 1924 by Norman Ware, who's the first modern labor historian, but it's been out of print forever. It just was reprinted, and it's, I think, very worth reading. Very illuminating. It's mostly quotes from the 19th century working class press. And remember, that was very substantial in scale. It was completely independent. It was just written by working people. Much of it edited and run by women, in fact, what were called the factory girls in Lowell, Massachusetts, and so on, and all over the place. From the beginning of the American Industrial Revolution up until it finally was killed off. I think one learns quite a lot from reading it about this spontaneous, essentially untutored, spontaneous reactions to the growing tide of capitalist authoritarianism, which was dominant across the working class, ordinary working people, until finally it was either beaten out of their heads or just silenced by bigger concentrations of power. Not that far back, in fact. The book's now again in print, and I think you can learn a lot about it from it about human nature, in fact, how it reflects itself when the new spirit of the age was imposed on it, on people. The review, just to give you the themes that run through it, I'll just quote some standard phrases that run through this whole period, are protest against what people call degradation, loss of dignity and independence, loss of self-respect, the decline of the worker as a person, the sharp decline in cultural level and attainments, which is a very striking fact, as workers were subjected to what they called wage slavery, not much different, they claimed, than the chattel slavery that they had fought to overcome during the Civil War. Particularly dramatic and actually relevant today is the very sharp decline in high culture. These are mostly people without much formal education, but they were very much immersed in the high culture of the day. So the factory girls of Lowell, young women from farms who came to the mills, they were reading and expected to be reading contemporary literature and classics. Artisans, if they had a little bit of money, would, say a shoemaker or something, would hire young boys to read to them while they worked, and they would be reading modern literature. And this runs right at least into the 1930s. I can remember it very well from my own family, mostly unemployed first-generation immigrants without much formal education, or even any in some case, but right in the middle of New York City high culture, right into the late 1930s. It took a long time to drive all of that out of people's heads. It wasn't easy. But it's been achieved, and not in the very recent past. That's also worth recalling. In their own words again, the working class press wrote that when you sell your product, you retain your person, but when you sell your labor, you sell yourself. You lose your rights as a free man, and you become the vassal of mammoth establishments, of a moneyed aristocracy that threatens annihilation to anyone who questions their right to enslave and oppress. Those who work in the mills ought to own them, the factory workers said back in the early 19th century. They should not have the status of machines ruled by private despots who are entrenching monarchic principles on democratic soil. This is not so long after the democratic revolution of the 18th century, and the idea that monarchic principles should be reestablished on democratic soil was intolerable. As these private despots drive downward freedom and rights, civilization, health, morals, and intellectuality in their new commercial feudalism. The labor press also condemns what they call the bought priesthood of the media, universities, and the intellectual class, the apologists who sought to justify what this absolute despotism that was the new spirit of the age and to instill its sordid and demeaning values. One of the early leaders of the AFL, about a century ago, let's remember the more conservative part of the labor movement. One of the early leaders of the AFL in around 1890 expressed the common view when he described the mission of the emerging labor movement, fighting bitter hostility and huge violence. I mean, it was way beyond anything in Europe. He described its mission as to overcome the sins of the market and defend democracy by extending it to control over industry by working people. And it, again, was not until the 1950s that the democratic culture succumbed to a huge corporate offensive, barely known, but there was an enormous propaganda offensive, business-based propaganda offensive in the early and through the 1950s, actually reached the point just to drive out of people's heads the idea that you could have the democratic culture of the kind I've just described. It got to the point where about a third of the textbooks in American schools were just paid for and given by, they were, corporate textbooks. They had gotten to, by the early 1950s, to having 20 or 30 million people a week watch business propaganda. The Taft-Hartley bill gave management the right to propagandize workers in the workplace. That had been illegal under the Wagner Act as an unfair labor practice, and that meant that working people in their place of work were deluged by propaganda. There were what were called business education industry days when the schools were called off so that everybody could be properly propagandized. Lansing, Michigan was one of the places where that happened. Teachers were taken to be given the word by corporate executives, and school children were told what to do, and so on. It was a huge, well-organized corporate offensive, and you learn a lot about the bought priesthood from the fact that it's not studied. This is a major phenomenon of modern America, just as the working class press is a major phenomenon of America in the 19th and early 20th century. And the first book on it just came out, first academic book just came out about 2 months ago. University of Illinois Press did the first American study of the huge corporate propaganda offensive called Selling Free Enterprise through the 1950s as business sought to drive down and destroy the democratic culture that had in fact emerged in the 1930s and through the wartime period. These are facts of major significance and not talked about very much, which tells you something too. Well, all of these ideas kind of just sampled, which just come out of ordinary working people putting together their own thoughts, expressing them, and so on, without any tutelage or anything else. And they're very similar all the way through. And these, I think, would have been completely intelligible to founders of classical liberalism, people like Adam Smith, or his contemporary, Wilhelm von Humboldt in Germany, who inspired John Stuart Mill, and who, like Smith, regarded creative work freely undertaken in association with others as the core value of a human life. As von Humboldt, these are the classics of classical liberalism. As he put it, if a person produces an object on command, we may admire what he did, but we will despise what he is. And for similar reasons, Adam Smith warned that in any civilized society, the government would have to intervene to prevent the division of labor, which he opposed, contrary to what's believed, and the government would have to do that in a civilized society in order to prevent division of labor from turning people into, as he put it, creatures as stupid and ignorant as it's possible for a human being to be. That is the obvious result of division of labor, which will turn someone into, just a machine. Maybe we'll admire what he does, but we'll despise what he is in the classical liberal terms. Smith, for similar reasons, based his rather nuanced advocacy of markets. He did advocate markets, but in a pretty complex way and a nuanced way, and he based it on the principle that under conditions of perfect liberty, markets would lead to perfect equality, and that was the moral justification for them. The idea that you either have equality or markets, that's a modern idea, strenuously opposed by Smith, and if he had believed that was true, he would have opposed markets based on his own principles. These are major major ideas of the classics, which have not only been forgotten, but indeed grossly distorted in the contemporary culture as it reconstructs them. You can find it out. The texts are available. Here the same thoughts were commonly expressed. So de Tocqueville in his famous Democracy in America, another standard thing that you're supposed to name but not read, he was particularly struck by what he called the equality of condition in America and regarded that as a prerequisite for democracy, as distinct from Europe, where there were sharp distinctions in condition and status and wealth, and therefore democracy was impossible. Here he echoed von Humboldt and Adam Smith, and in fact the labor press at the same time, in describing wage labor and division of labor as degrading, dehumanizing to the laborer. De Tocqueville's phrase was that art advances, but the artisan recedes. That's the same point that Smith and von Humboldt and other classical liberals are making when they oppose wage labor. Thomas Jefferson, the leading Enlightenment figure in the United States, along with Benjamin Franklin, who took exactly the same view, Jefferson argued that, as he put it, dependence will lead to subservience and venality and will suffocate the genius of virtue. And remember, by dependence, he meant wage labor. That was the meaning of dependence. So when he talked about dependence leading to venality and subservience and suffocating the germs of virtue, germs, not genius, the germs of virtue, he was talking about wage labor, which was considered an abomination under classical liberal principles. Now, there's a modern perversion of conservatism and libertarianism which has changed the meanings of words, pretty much the way Orwell discussed. So nowadays, dependence refers to something else. When you listen to what's going on in Congress and people talk about dependence, what they mean by dependence is public support for hungry children, not wage labor. That's dependence. Dependence is support for hungry children and mothers who are caring for them. And in a further vulgarization, which is typical of the new spirit of the age, mothers who care for children are not doing work. Therefore, they have to be driven into the workforce. That's taken for granted by anyone. Taking care of a child is not working. That's a very intriguing, it's an intriguing property of our culture. It reveals, it's a highly ideological, very fanatic intellectual culture where people can even say these things without collapsing in ridicule. But they're said without comment. Mothers taking care of children are not doing work. So we compare child care with real work, worded and is therefore socially useful by our criteria, like speculating against currencies in an effort to drive growth rates down. That's work, but not taking care of children. And those, incidentally, are the values. It's not in question. These are the values, because we're supposed to measure social utility by economic return, and if you're just taking care of a child, you get no economic return, but furthermore, you're not even working, so you have to be driven to the workforce. On the other hand, if you're moving $1 trillion a day around to try to drive down growth rates by speculating against currencies, that's real work, and you make a huge amount of money from it. Well, those are the values. This is part of something more general. The idea that raising children comes free is just an aspect of a more general principle that traditional women's work altogether comes free. These ideas are incredible, even on the narrowest economic grounds. I mean, any economic theory, play the whole Chicago school game or whatever you like, that talks about human capital and not people and, the whole business. It's totally insane on these grounds. I mean, everyone understands that the major factor contributing to economic growth, however measured, is what's called human capital, human capacity to do things. Well, where does that come from? Well, it comes from mothers taking care of children, but that's not work. So you got to stop it and drive them into the workforce. Those are the principles of the new spirit of the age, and they're pretty astonishing when you look at them on any terms. Even if you accept the whole ideological framework, they range somewhere between unimaginable and lunatic. I don't know exactly where to place them, but somewhere around there. Well, Dewey, and it's a sign of what's happened since the 18th century, since, say, Adam Smith and Thomas Jefferson, that this passes without comment. Dewey and Russell were two of the leading 20th century inheritors of this tradition, with its roots in the Enlightenment and classical liberalism, and in the quite inspiring record of struggle and organization and protest by working men and women since the early 19th century, as they sought to win freedom and justice and to retain the rights that they once had had as this new despotism of state-supported private power extended its sway, particularly in the early 20th century when it took on the corporate form. And I stress again, that's an analog to fascism and Bolshevism and came from the same roots, and is in some ways even grander now that it's transnational in scale. The basic issue was formulated quite clearly by Thomas Jefferson. It was before the Industrial Revolution had really taken roots in the former colonies. In his later years, Jefferson lived till I think 1826, and towards the end of his life, he was observing what was happening, and he had rather serious concerns about the fate of the democratic experiment, for which he was the leading intellectual spokesman and major Enlightenment figure. He feared that the rise of a new form of absolutism, which he considered as being more ominous than the form of absolutism that the American Revolution 50 years earlier had overthrown. And in writing about this in his last years, he distinguished between what he called aristocrats and democrats. Aristocrats, he said, are those who fear and distrust the people and wish to draw all powers from them into the hands of the higher classes, in particular moneyed banking institutions and moneyed-in corporations, what we would nowadays call corporations. That was just on the future, and he warned specifically against that. So that's the aristocrats. The Democrats, in contrast, in his words, identify with the people, have confidence in them, cherish and consider them as the honest and safe depository of the public interest, even if not only the most wise, always the most wise. Well, the aristocrats of his day were the advocates of the rising capitalist state, and remember, the United States had a developmental state. The U.S. invented the concept of state protection of industry and state subsidy for development. That, dismissing any free market nonsense. That's a U.S. invention, and other developing societies have done pretty much the same thing, in fact, without exception. The British, of course, did it before us, but the U.S. did it par excellence, and it retains that right up to the present, incidentally. And he saw that happening. He saw the beginnings of publicly subsidized private power developing, and those were the aristocrats. He, of course, Jefferson regarded this with a good deal of disdain, and he recognized the perfectly obvious contradiction between democracy and capitalism, or more accurately, between democracy and what you might call really existing capitalism that is guided and subsidized by a powerful developmental state. That's a fundamental contradiction. And it just increased as corporate structures were granted increasing powers, primarily early in this century, not by democratic procedures, but by courts and lawyers, who turned these banking institutions and moneyed-in corporations, of which Jefferson warned, into immortal persons with powers and rights beyond the worst nightmares of pre-capitalist thinkers like Adam Smith or Thomas Jefferson. And again, that's fairly recently. We tend to think of it as sort of like immutable truth, but it's early in this century. Jefferson's distinction between aristocrats and Democrats was developed further about a half a century later by Bakunin, anarchist thinker. This is one of the few predictions of the social sciences that has ever come true. It should have a place of honor in every curriculum for that reason alone, I think. Bakunin predicted that the rising intelligentsia, sort of what he called the new class of intellectuals who were kind of coming into existence in that period, the early modern period. He said the rising intelligentsia, he predicted, will follow one of two quite parallel paths. This is around the middle of the last century. He said they will either exploit popular struggles to take state power, becoming what he called a red bureaucracy that will impose the most cruel and vicious regime in history, or they will see that real power lies elsewhere and they will become its bought priesthood, in the words of the labor press at the same time, serving the real masters in the state-supported private systems of power, either as managers or apologists, who beat the people with the people's stick, in his words, in the state capitalist democracies. Well, as I say, that's one of the few predictions that I know of any scale that's actually worked out, and it's pretty accurate about the 20th century. Independently of Jefferson and Bakunin, others were coming to the same understanding, though drawing quite different conclusions from it. Now we're getting into the mainstream of American thought. So far I've been talking about the periphery, people like Adam Smith and Jefferson who were strongly opposed to what was going on. But let's take, the ones in the middle, like a leading American intellectual, Charles Francis Adams, in 1880, so a little over a century ago. He described the rise of what is now called post-industrial society by Daniel Bell and John Kenneth Galbraith and Robert Reich and others. This is a society, he didn't use the term, but it's the same thing. It's a society in which the future, in his words, is in the hands of our universities, our schools, our specialists, our scientific men, and our writers, and those who do the actual work of management in the ideological and economic institutions. Nowadays they're called the technocratic elite or the action intellectuals or some other term. Adams concluded that the first object of the thinking citizen now should be not to keep one political party or other in power, but to insist on order and submission to law, meaning that these new rising elites should be permitted to function in what, to borrow some current World Bank lingo, is called technocratic isolation, protected from popular pressures. And that's a very standard view now in those who pass themselves off as free market Democrats. So take, say, the London Economist, which is maybe one of the leading journals, as it describes the ideal today, policy should be insulated from politics. Okay, so leaders, elites, should be able to work in technocratic insulation independently from any games that people play in the public arena. That's another leading component of the new spirit of the age, and we're getting pretty close to it. A decade earlier, in 1870, Adams had warned against universal suffrage. There was very limited suffrage at that time. He warned against universal suffrage on the grounds that it would bring, he said, a government of ignorant and vice, with power in the hands of a European and especially Celtic proletariat on the Atlantic coast. Remember, Ireland was being depopulated by one of these free market experiments with its usual consequences, genocide and so on. We would get this Celtic proletariat on the Atlantic coast, an African proletariat on the shores of the Gulf, and a Chinese proletariat on the Pacific. He didn't foresee the sophisticated techniques that would be developed in the 20th century to ensure that policy remains insulated from politics, as the franchise was indeed extended through a lot of popular struggle, but with various techniques to guarantee that the public would remain marginalized and disaffected, subdued by the new spirit of the age, and coming to see themselves not as free people who have a right to dignity and independence, but as atoms of consumption who sell themselves on the labor market. If they're lucky, a lot of populace do what they're told. Adams wasn't innovating. He was expressing ideas that go right back to the founding fathers, notably Alexander Hamilton, whose view was, as he put it, that your people is a great beast and the real disease is democracy. These ideas became ever more entrenched in educated circles as Jefferson's fears and Bakunin's predictions were increasingly realized. Coming to the modern period, these same ideas were expressed quite clearly and lucidly by Woodrow Wilson's Secretary of State, Robert Lansing. We're now talking about what's called Wilsonian idealism in American ideological doctrine. So according to Wilsonian idealism, as expressed by Robert Lansing, these are incidentally the attitudes that animated Wilson's Red Scare, which destroyed the labor movement and independent thought for a decade, with the support of the liberal press and so on. Lansing warned of the danger of allowing the ignorant and incapable mass of humanity to become dominant in the earth, or even influential, as he mistakenly believed that the Bolsheviks intended in the hysterical and wholly erroneous reaction that's standard among people who feel that their power might be threatened. These concerns, deep anti-democratic, anti-popular concerns going right back to the origins of the Republic. There was a real split between the Hamiltonian and the Jeffersonian view, and the Hamiltonian one prevailed. These concerns were articulated very clearly at that time by one of the leading progressive intellectuals of the day, Walter Lippmann. He was a major political commentator and commentator on world affairs in the sort of liberal progressive tradition right into the 1960s. But in the 1920s, he wrote what are called his progressive essays on democracy, expressing Wilsonian idealism. He advised, in his words, that the public must be put in its place so that the responsible men may live free of the trampling and the roar of a bewildered herd. In a democracy, he said, these what he called ignorant and meddlesome outsiders, that's the general public, the ignorant and meddlesome outsiders have a function. So a democracy isn't like a totalitarian state. The function of the ignorant, meddlesome outsiders is to be interested spectators of action, but not participants. They're supposed to lend their weight periodically to some member of the leadership class, that's called an election, and then they're supposed to return to their private concerns. Similar notions became part of mainstream academic ideology, democratic theory, to put it more politely, at the same time. In his presidential address to the American Political Science Association in 1934, we're now into the New Deal, William Shepard argued that the government should be in the hands of an aristocracy of intellect and power, while the ignorant, the uninformed, and the antisocial elements must not be permitted to control elections, as they had in the past, he mistakenly believed, quite mistakenly. Actually, the foundations of the democratic polity, as described, for example, by James Madison in famous, or what should be famous, discussions, were that he was like Adam Smith. He recognized that society is divided sharply into economic classes with fundamental conflicts between them, and he said that the government must, this is in the Constitutional Convention debates, the government must be set up to protect the minority of the opulent from the majority who might seek a more egalitarian structure. That's the basic principle that government must achieve. I should say later in his life, Madison moved towards a more egalitarian view of the Jeffersonian type, but this is Constitutional Convention period. John Jay, the president of the Constitutional Convention, first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, his favorite maxim, his biographer writes, was that the people who own the country ought to govern it. The others are supposed to be observers. Since it's a democracy, they're allowed to, some of them at least, can lend their weight to one or another of the owners every once in a while, but that's it. One of the founders of modern political science, Harold Lasswell, he wrote in the Encyclopedia of the Social Sciences in 1934 that modern techniques of propaganda, which had been impressively refined by Wilsonian liberals, provided the way to keep the rabble in line. He was pretty frank about it. Wilson himself Lasswell described as the generalissimo of propaganda. His first scholarly work, Lasswell, was on the quite impressive propaganda achievements of Wilson during the Second World War. Lasswell wasn't the only one impressed. These achievements also greatly impressed Adolf Hitler. You can read about it in Mein Kampf. He felt that the Germans had been kind of wiped out by the power of Anglo-American propaganda, particularly by the generalissimo Wilson, and he vowed that next time around they'd do it the right way. Perhaps more importantly, these achievements greatly impressed the American business community. That's what led to the huge expansion of the public relations industry, an enormous industry, an American invention, spends billions of dollars a year on what its advocates in more honest days used to call controlling the public mind, or into the 1950s, fighting the everlasting battle for the minds of men. As a political scientist, Lasswell urged more sophisticated use of these new techniques of control, as he put it, of the general public, the new techniques that were provided by modern propaganda. These would enable, he said, the intelligent men of the community, the natural rulers, to overcome the threat of the great beast who might undermine order because of the ignorance and superstition of the masses. I'm still quoting him. We must not, he said, succumb to democratic dogmatisms about men being the best judges of their own interests. The best judges are the elites, who must therefore be ensured the means to impose their will for the common good. That's Jefferson's aristocrats. Well, Lippmann and Lasswell and Wilson and so on, they represent the more progressive fringe of opinion as the new spirit of the age began to dominate. That grants the beast at least a spectator role. At the more reactionary end, you find those who are mislabeled conservatives in contemporary newspeak. So the Reaganite statist reactionaries, they denied even the spectator role to the errant public. That explains their fascination with huge clandestine terror operations. Why does a country carry out clandestine terror? Who is it secret from? Well, it's certainly not secret from the victims. They know all about it. It's not secret to the big terrorist network. For us, we're a big guy, not a little guy. We don't hire terrorists. We hire terrorist states. So the U.S. terrorist network in Central America, clandestine, so-called, included Britain and Taiwan and Israel and Saudi Arabia funding it, and Argentine neo-Nazis and so on. Big terror networks. Not a secret to them. It's obviously not a secret to the victims. In fact, it's not even a secret to the press, but it's just low level enough so you can pretend you don't know about it until it becomes impossible. The main thing is it's got to be kept a secret from the domestic population, from the great beast. So clandestine operations are one of the many kinds of operation carried out by reactionary statists in fear of the great beast, who are not supposed to even be spectators, let alone participants. Also the unprecedented measures of censorship and agitprop, which were developed by the Reaganites, finally declared illegal. These and other measures were an effort to ensure that the powerful and interventionist state that they nurtured would be able to carry out its international operations in secret from the great beast, and would also be able to serve as a welfare state for the rich, as it did, not troubled by the rabble. We see this very dramatically right at this moment in Congress under the leadership of Newt Gingrich, who quite demonstrably is the leading welfare freak in the country. I'll talk about it if you like, but if you think about it, he is the most avid advocate of welfare in the country, except he wants to go to the rich. His own district in Cobb County, Georgia, gets more federal subsidies than any suburban county in the country outside of the federal system itself. Like, doesn't get as much as Arlington, Virginia, which is, where the Pentagon is and so on. But if you go outside the federal system, he beats it all, and it's supposed to continue, because this kind of welfare dependency is good. Dependent children, that's bad, but dependent executives, that's good. You got to make sure they keep feeding at the public trough. In the same period, and especially in the 80s, there was a huge increase in business propaganda, another big assault on universities by right-wing foundations, all other similar tendencies. These are a further manifestation of the same concerns. They were a reaction to what liberal elites, to go back to the other side of the spectrum, to what liberal elites called the crisis of democracy that developed in the 1960s. The crisis of democracy arose when previously marginalized and apathetic sectors of the population, like women and youth and the aged, and farmers and workers and so on, the parts that are supposed to be silent, began to become organized and to press their concerns in the public arena. And if you're naive and you believe what you were taught in 8th grade civics, that's democracy. But if you're sophisticated liberal, you know that that's a crisis of democracy which has to be overcome by driving the great beast back into its lair. And that's exactly what policy has been dedicated to ever since. If you think this is an exaggeration, I just urge that you read the original documents. I'm kind of understating it. In fact, in this Trilateral Commission conference, it's the liberal trilateral international elites, called The Crisis of Democracy, the American rapporteur, the American contributor, is well-known professor of government at Harvard. In fact, he holds a chair, the title of which I love. It's called the Chair of the Science of Government at Harvard. The science of government, as he explained it, teaches what I just described, and then he kind of looked back nostalgically to the days before the crisis of democracy arose, when, as he put it, Truman was able to govern the country with the help of a few Wall Street lawyers and financiers. Then there was no crisis of democracy because the great beast was busy doing something else. But now the crisis arose, and so we got to go back to real democracy. Well, that's the liberal side again. John Dewey was one of the last relics of the Enlightenment and classical liberal tradition who opposed the onslaught of the Jeffersonian aristocrats, whether they find their place on the liberal or reactionary parts of this very narrow ideological spectrum. Dewey also understood that politics, in his words, is the shadow cast on society by big business, and as long as this is so, attenuation of the shadow will not change the substance. This, incidentally, once again echoes what Adam Smith took to be a truism, that the nation is not an entity, that it's divided into economic classes, and that the architects of policy are those who have the economic power. In his day, he said, the merchants and manufacturers of England, who make sure that their interests are most peculiarly attended to, well tended, like Gingrich, but whatever the effect on others, including the people of England. To Adam Smith, that was a truism. To James Madison, it was a truism. Nowadays, you're supposed to recoil in horror and call it vulgar Marxism or something, meaning that Adam Smith and James Madison must have been disciples of Marx. And if you believe the rest of the story, you might as well believe that. But those are facts which you can easily discover if you bother reading the sacred texts that you're supposed to worship, as I say, but not read. Well, into the 20th century, you still have relics like Dewey, who recognized that politics is the shadow cast on society by big business. Reforms will therefore be of limited utility because democracy requires that the source of the shadow be removed, not only because of its domination of the political arena, which is trivially obvious, but because the very institutions of private power undermine democracy and freedom. And Dewey, like his forebears back to Smith, Adam Smith and others in the Enlightenment, right through the working class press, he was quite explicit about the anti-democratic power that he had in mind. So I'm quoting Dewey from the 1920s. Power today resides in control of the means of production, exchange, publicity, transportation, and communication. Whoever owns them rules the life of the country, even if democratic forms remain. Business for private profit through private control of banking, land, industry, reinforced by command of the press, press agents, and other means of publicity and propaganda, that's the system of actual power and the source of coercion and control. And until it's unraveled, you can't talk seriously about democracy and freedom. He then repeated standard themes of the 19th century working class press, saying that In a free and democratic society, workers should be the masters of their own industrial fate, not tools rented by employers. And he agreed on fundamental issues with the founders of classical liberalism, and indeed with the libertarian and democratic sentiments that animated the whole spontaneous and independent working class movements from the early Industrial Revolution up until the time when they were finally beaten down, not that far back, by the force of concentrated private power and indeed violence. Going back to education, on the same grounds, Dewey held that it is, as he put it, illiberal and immoral to train children to work not freely and intelligently, but for the sake of the work earned. In that case, their work is not free because not freely participated in. Again, that's another version of the standard conception of classical libertarian thought and of the workers' movement. The art may advance, but the artisan recedes. We may admire what the craftsman does, but we despise what he is. Same ideas all the way through. And Dewey therefore held, again, classical view, that industry must be changed from a feudalistic to a democratic social order based on workers' control and free association, traditional libertarian ideas from the Enlightenment right through modern anarchist movements. Well, as the doctrinal system has narrowed under the assault of private power, particularly in the past few decades, these fundamental classical libertarian principles sound kind of exotic and extreme, perhaps even anti-American, to borrow one of the terms of contemporary totalitarian thought. You'll notice that there's very few societies where such terms can be used. There are some. So in Stalin's Russia, anti-Sovietism was the worst crime that you could be accused of, anti-Sovietism. In the United States, anti-Americanism is a terrible crime. But in any society where there's the shreds of a democratic culture remaining, that would just be treated as ridicule. I mean, you try to, on the streets of Milan or Rome, accuse somebody of anti-Italianism. I mean, they'd probably collapse in laughter or something. Or in Belgium or someplace, or in fact any place where there's a residue of democratic culture still existing, whatever the forms may be. But in the Soviet Union and the United States, and I actually don't know of other, maybe Brazil under the generals or something, you can talk about things like that, like anti-Americanism. In fact, here there are books called Anti-Americanism, which are lauded and taken seriously. That's an interesting insight into the actual nature of the culture. Well, in the light of this quite radical regression in intellectual culture, it's useful to remember that the kinds of ideas that Dewey was expressing, they are as American as apple pie. That's straight mainstream American thinking. He comes right out of Middle America, but just from a different tradition, the tradition that has died, the tradition that existed from classical libertarian thought right through the 19th century and into the early 20th century, has origins in a very worthy tradition, at least in my opinion, one that's ritually lauded, although commonly distorted and forgotten. All of that is part of the deterioration of functioning democracy in the current age, both at the institutional and the ideological levels, at least in my opinion. Well, I've been talking about education a bit and other things, but education is only in part a matter of schools and colleges and the informal system. In fact, that's true whether the goal of these systems is education for democracy, as Dewey advocated, or education for obedience and subordination and marginalization, as indeed is the practice. But it's either way, it's just part of education, in fact, a small part. One leading University of Chicago sociologist, James Coleman, he concludes from many studies that, I'm quoting him, the total effect of home background is considerably greater than the total effect of school variables in determining student achievement. He estimates about twice as powerful an effect. So it's therefore important to have a look at how social policy in the dominant culture is shaping these factors, really the dominant ones in education. Well, that inquiry is facilitated by a quite important study done by UNICEF in 1993. UNICEF usually studies poor countries, but they did one recently, 1993, that studied rich countries. It's called Child Neglect in Rich Nations. The study is carried out by Sylvia Ann Hewlett, who's quite a well-known American. Has been, I'm now quoting her, a disaster for children and families. The European model, in contrast, has improved their situation considerably from a starting point that's already considerably higher, and societies that incidentally lack the enormous advantages of the Anglo-American societies. The United States alone has unparalleled advantages in every respect. Therefore, the disaster for children and families and working people is particularly striking in the country, considering its options, which are unparalleled. This Anglo-American disaster for children and families, Hewlett attributes to the ideological preference for free markets. I think here she's mistaken, or at least half mistaken. Reaganite conservatism did advocate markets, but for the poor, at home and abroad. On the other hand, it went way beyond its statist predecessors in demanding and winning a very high level of public subsidy and protection for the rich. They talked about free markets for the public, but when James Baker, Secretary of Treasury, was talking to business audiences, he boasted more accurately that the Reagan administration had given them more protection in violation of market principles than any preceding administration in the post-war period, which was true but overly modest. In fact, it was more than all post-war administrations combined. It roughly doubled protectionism in the United States, breaking records even for that protectionist decade, and that's apart from the enormous funneling of public funds to private power through things like the Pentagon system and so on, which is the main welfare system in the United States. That's why it doesn't change when the Cold War ends. It's got other functions, as the business world has always understood very explicitly. Whatever you want to call the guiding ideology, it's unfair to tarnish the good name of conservatism by applying it to this form of violent, lawless, and reactionary statism. However, Hewlett is right in part. She's right in identifying the free market for the poor as the source of the disaster. And there's a long history behind that. The difference, you go back to the 18th century and what's now called the Third World and the industrial world, were roughly equivalent. One of them was subjected to free market experiments. The other of them insisted on high levels of protectionism and state subsidy for private power, and the difference is dramatic, and it's virtually exceptionless. This is one of the few sort of near laws of economic history, and it works domestically as well. And she's right about talking about that consequence of the disaster, what she calls the anti-child and anti-family spirit that is loose in these lands. She's referring to the United States and Britain. This neglect-filled Anglo-American model, she says, based on market discipline for the poor, has largely privatized child rearing while making it effectively impossible for most of the population. And the result is naturally a disaster for children and families, which she then records. In contrast, the much more supportive European-Japanese model, their social policy has strengthened rather than weakened support systems for families and children, and the results are quite different. And it's also no big secret. There was a 1993 Blue Ribbon Commission of the State Boards of Education and the American Medical Association reported that in the United States, it's the same in England, but in the United States, never before has one generation of children been less healthy, less cared for, or less prepared for life than their parents were at the same age, though only in the Anglo-American societies, where an anti-child, anti-family spirit has reigned for about 15 years under the guise of conservatism and family values. That's pretty impressive achievement. In fact, it's a great achievement of contemporary propaganda that it's possible to carry this off. Something that would have impressed even Generalissimo Woodrow Wilson, I expect. A symbolic expression of the disaster is that when Hewlett wrote in 1993, 146 countries had ratified the International Convention on Rights of the Child, but the U.S. had not. That's incidentally quite a standard pattern on international conventions on human rights. Today it's 161 countries that have ratified it, and Congress still has not done so. Last year was the International Year of the Child, I should say. A symbolic expression, that's one symbolic expression. So I should add, just to be fair, that Reaganite conservatism was quite Catholic in its anti-child, anti-family spirit, didn't just direct it against the beast at home. So the World Health Organization voted to condemn the Nestle Corporation for aggressive marketing of infant formula, which is killing many children, as everyone knows. The vote was 118 to 1. Guess who the one is. This is pretty minor, however, as compared with what the World Health Organization calls the silent genocide, which is killing millions of children every year as a result of free market policies for the poor and the refusal of the rich country to grant what literally amounts to pennies of aid. And again, the United States has by far the worst record among the industrial societies, the most miserly record with regard to so-called aid. That's an interesting fact and quite contrary to common perceptions created by the propaganda system, but easily determined. Another symbolic expression of the disaster is a new line of Hallmark greeting cards. One of them reads, "Have a super day at school." That one is supposed to be put under the cereal box in the morning after parents have gone off to work. Another one says, "I wish I had more time to tuck you in." That one, is, as they put it, is supposed to peek out under the pillow at night because the parents haven't gotten home. In part, this disaster for families and children is just the result of falling wages, and that's deliberate social policy. A state corporate policy has been designed to enrich a small sector and to impoverish the majority. It's now escalating, and it's succeeded in the past 15 years. The statistics show it quite clearly. So people just have to work harder. They have to work more hours, much longer to survive, and for much of the population, it's necessary for two parents to work, maybe 50 or 60 hours a week sometime, just in order to provide necessities. Meanwhile, corporate profits are sailing through the roof. Last year was a record year for corporate profits. The last quarter of last year was 60% higher than the preceding one. You know, the Wall Street Journal was falling all over itself in joy. 1993, the preceding year, was described by Fortune magazine as a dazzling year for profits despite stagnating sales. And that's even overlooking the major sources of capital, which are are speculative capital in places like Goldman Sachs and so on. So there's the business about a lean and mean age is total nonsense. Countries are awash in capital, but it's very highly concentrated. Wages are going down, but profits are going way up, exactly as intended, and current policy is intended to accelerate that tendency quite explicitly. Another factor leading to the same disaster is what's called job insecurity. There's a technical name for that. It's called flexibility of labor markets. That's supposed to be a good thing. Labor markets are supposed to be flexible under the reigning academic theology. Labor so happens to be a rotten thing for human beings, but their fate doesn't enter into the considerations of sober thinking. Flexibility of labor markets means that when you go to sleep at night, you don't have to have a job the next day. And you don't have pensions and, other market rigidities. They're eliminated if you learn the lingo. You know what this means. That's true, and indeed when both parents are working extra hours or else, kicked out because there's no security. And for most with falling incomes, it doesn't take a great genius to figure out what the consequences are going to be, and the statistics show them. The contact time between parents and children has dropped precipitously in the past generation, maybe about 40%, 10 to 12 hours a week, she estimates. And high-quality contact time, when parents are really spending time with one another, has dropped very, very sharply. And that has obvious effects. It leads to destruction of family identity and values. sharply increased reliance on television for child supervision, latchkey children, leave the kids alone, with rising child alcoholism and drug abuse, a lot of more increased violence by children and against children, and all the other obvious effects on health, education, and ability to participate in a functioning society. At the same time, what's called welfare, we don't call welfare what goes to rich people, but we call welfare the little trickle that goes to poor people, and that's declined very sharply, contrary to what's being said. So aid for families with dependent children has dropped precipitously since 1970. It's about halved since then, and that has the obvious effects, breakdown of families, illegitimacy, inability to take care of children, the general disaster and the neglect-filled Anglo-American model. In Europe and Japan, where conditions are in fact more stringent, they don't have their advantages, but policy is not guided by the same anti-child, anti-family spirit, the tendencies have been in the opposite direction. And the standards for children and families are indeed much better, in fact improving. And you don't have to even compare us with Japan. Take something and Europe. Take, say, the simple matter of leave for working parents. Here it's not fathers, just working mothers when a child's born. Maternity leave for childbirth. U.S. standards are now below those of plantation workers in Uganda, believe it or not. That's where we stand in the anti-family, anti-child spirit that reigns in the land. In Europe and Japan and even Uganda, there's a strong trade union movement by our standards. That's one aspect of a more fundamental difference. The United States is a business-run society to quite an unparalleled degree for all kind of historical reasons. And as a result, the vile maxim of the masters prevails to an unprecedented extent as well, despite the extraordinary wealth of the society, which is totally unparalleled. You have this third world character developing that you just don't find in other industrial societies outside of England, which are pretty much like us. Well, these are among the means that allow democracy to function formally, though by now most of the population is consumed by what's called anti-politics, hatred of government, disdain for political parties, and for the whole democratic process, and that's also pretty dramatic. So about half the population in the United States thinks that both political parties should simply be disbanded. About two-thirds of the population, as you know, don't bother voting. And of those who vote, still more interestingly, those who vote, most of them vote against their interests and know it. If you look at exit polls, turns out most people are opposed to what they're voting for. In the last elections, in which the Republicans got about maybe 18% of the electorate or something, bare majority of the minority that voted, 1 out of 6 voters said they were voting for the Republican agenda, or even knew what it was. About one, to put it properly, 1 out of 6 said it was an issue in their vote, some for it, some against it. So if you want to be charitable, maybe 5% of the population granted the overwhelming landslide mandate that we hear about. In addition to that, over 80% of the population regard not only the political system as gone, but they regard the economic system as inherently unfair. But this is just a great beast, and their attitudes are irrelevant once policy is insulated from politics. Well, all of this is a great victory for the aristocrats in Jefferson's sense, those who fear and distrust the people and wish to draw all powers from them into the hands of the higher classes. By now that means into the hands of transnational corporations and investment firms and so on, and the states and the quasi-governmental institutions like the World Trade Organization and the IMF and so on that serve their interests. Another great victory is the fact that disillusionment, and there's plenty of it, the country's very angry, disillusioned, frightened, and so on, it's taking the form of anti-politics. That's interesting. So you read, a headline in the New York Times says, "Anger and cynicism well up in voters as hope gives way. Mood turns ugly as more people become disillusioned with politics." Well, they had a whole Sunday magazine section devoted to anti-politics. Notice that the opposition, it's not opposition to power and authority. It's not opposition to the quite easily identifiable forces that have their hands on the levers of decision-making. They are invisible in this commissar culture. All you see is what Dewey called the shadow. So Dewey's observation that politics is the shadow cast on society by big business, again, a truism to Adam Smith and James Madison, that's now become invisible. It's just another aspect of the degeneration of the cultural system. The force that casts the shadow has been removed from the ideological institutions, and it's so remote from consciousness that we're left with anti-politics. That is, opposition to the shadow. There's plenty to be opposed to in the shadow, but that's not the problem, as was understood from, say, Adam Smith up through early 20th century mainstream liberals. All of this is another severe blow to democracy, and in fact a grand gift to the absolutist and unaccountable systems of power that have reached levels that a Thomas Jefferson or John Dewey could scarcely have imagined. Well, today we have a choice. We always have a choice, and those of us who are lucky enough, and most of us are lucky enough to have a choice, we can choose to be Democrats in Thomas Jefferson's sense, or aristocrats. The latter path is the easy one. It will bring rich rewards, given the locus of wealth and privilege and power, and the ends that it quite naturally seeks. The other path is one of struggle, often defeat, but also rewards that cannot even be imagined by those who succumb to the new spirit of the age, which is the same now as it was 150 years ago, gain wealth, forgetting all but self. Today's world is far from Thomas Jefferson's. The choices that it offers have not, however, changed in any fundamental way. Thank you.
Hi, this is Roger Leisner for Radio Free Maine, and you've been listening to Noam Chomsky speaking on education and democracy, recorded on March 28, 1995 at Michigan State University. For a copy of this tape, please contact Roger Leisner, Leisner, in care of Radio Free Maine, Post Office Box 2705, Augusta, Maine 04338. Or call area code 207-622-6629. That is also a fax number. We now join Noam Chomsky for the question and answer period.
What are my thoughts on tax resistance? I happen to think the United States is seriously undertaxed. The problem isn't. I can see the point of tax resistance if it's trying to block the F-22. So you give the what taxes are being used for, and those sensible people should pay it. I myself was involved in tax resistance for years. On the other hand, speaking more generally, it seems to me the problem's the opposite. By comparative standards, the country's undertaxed. And it's also regressively taxed. The tax burden falls mostly on the poor. And what we need is a progressive tax system of, incidentally, the kind that Jefferson advocated. Traditional libertarians like Jefferson advocated sharply progressive taxes because they wanted a system of relative equality, knowing that that's a prerequisite for democracy. Jefferson specifically advocated. We don't have it anymore. It's sort of there in legislation, but it's gone. What we need is different social policies, and social policies which ought to be funded by the people who are going to benefit from them. That's the general public. So we'd be a lot better off if we were higher taxed and it was used for proper purposes. And we know what those are. I mean, for example, for women taking care of children. Makes sense to pay them for that work. They're doing important work for the society, and they should be paid for it. And it's, but that requires tax payment. And the same is true about protection of the environment. You want a place where your children are going to be able to survive. You better take care of it now, or else we'll get another Georgia Spank and another one, and so on. But again, that's the way public funds ought to be spent. They should not be spent to, for Newt Gingrich's rich constituents. By international standards, we're undertaxed. This is one of the least taxed countries. Furthermore, contrary to what people believe, low taxes have nothing to do with growth. I mean, there's plenty of evidence on this. We are undertaxed, but also overtaxed, because the taxes we pay go for the wrong things. See, the numbers themselves don't mean anything. You could have very low taxes all going into the pockets of Goldman Sachs, and we would be overtaxed. You can have very high taxes and it going for useful purposes, and we might be undertaxed. The question is what the policies are. Exactly what the level ought to be, that ought to be subject to democratic discussion and debate, which it is not. Yeah. The question is, and it's a sensible one, whether devolution, that means moving power down to the state level and away from the federal government, couldn't that be a step towards democratization, as in fact the Gingrich guys claim? It could be under certain conditions. It isn't under these conditions. And the reason it isn't is because what's being overlooked is that there's a huge system of private tyranny. And given that there's a huge system of private tyranny, weakening the public role, which is what happens, simply gives more power to private tyranny. Let's be quite concrete about it. Take, say, Massachusetts, where I live. Middle-sized businesses in Massachusetts are now threatening that they're going to leave to go to Tennessee or someplace like that unless they get more what amounts to welfare from the state. Okay? Whether it's tax subsidies or tax reductions or subsidies or one thing or another, and they can do that. They can play one state against one state public against another. You have to be General Motors or Microsoft or something to threaten the federal government with that. So the private tyrannies are there, and they do, like General Motors does play one national workforce against another. That's why they move their assembly plants to northern Mexico and Poland and so on instead of Flint, Michigan. But that's for the big guys. The big tyrants, the big private tyrannies can play that game. But even minimal private tyrannies smaller ones can play this game. And that's why things are going down to the state level. Now, unless you change that by putting things down to the state level, you're simply putting more power into their hands. So there's perfectly clear examples of this. The federal government passed a transportation bill some years back, I forget, like 5 or 6 years ago. And the idea was for federal money to go for purposes of transportation. And it was sent to the states. Okay, 96% of it was sent on automobile-related transportation. Is that because that's what people want? No. What most people want is mass transportation you can pay for. I mean, by now, poor people can't afford to take the subway. Like in Philadelphia, where there's now a strike, subway costs are $1.50 a ride. I mean, who can afford that when you're going to go to work? First you got to take your kid to the daycare center that you can't pay for, and that costs $1.50, and then you go to work, and it's another $1.50, and then you come home, you lost your day's salary. 96% of the funds are going for private transportation, okay, or either airports, which is for a tiny group of rich, really, or for highways for the trucking industry, for the motor industry, basically. That's not the first time that's happened. It also happens on the federal level, but the point is, and the purpose of it was to be distributed. And it's not satisfying the purpose, and the states can do that. And they're under private pressure to do it from the construction lobbies and, other relatively small industries. So you're right. In principle, it could be a democratizing thing, and indeed it would be the right thing, in my opinion, if we didn't have private power around. But you cannot ignore the fact that there's this, big substance that's casting a shadow over everything. Ignore that, and you're not talking about the real world. And in the real world, putting things down in the hands of the states means you're just submitting them to that power, which eliminates whatever limited role the public still has. So yeah, in some other world, you'd be right. And we ought to, I think, try to create that world, but we don't have it now. The question, two questions. One, how could I call myself a libertarian socialist? Was it a contradiction in terms, given the meaning of the term libertarian in the United States? And secondly, if I'm opposed to state-subsidized capitalism, what about laissez-faire capitalism, the kind advocated by Adam Smith, right? Well, you're right that the terms that I'm using are contradictory in the United States, but that's a sign of the perversity of American culture. Here, the term libertarian means the opposite of what it meant to everybody else all through history. So what I was describing was the real Adam Smith and the real Thomas Jefferson and so on, who were anti-capitalist and called for equality and thought that people shouldn't be subjected to wage labor because that's destructive of their humanity, and the real Adam Smith, who said that a government in any civilized society, something has to be done to prevent division of labor because it will turn people into creatures as stupid and as ignorant as possible for a human to be, and who advocated markets only on the grounds that under perfect liberty it would lead to perfect equality. Okay, that's the traditional libertarian tradition that I've been talking about, and in that sense, yeah, I'm a libertarian. The U.S. sense is quite different. Here, every word has taken on the opposite of its meaning elsewhere. So here, libertarian means extreme advocate of total tyranny. That's what libertarian means here. It means power ought to be given into the hands of private, unaccountable tyrannies, even worse than state tyrannies, because there the public has some kind of role. The corporate system, especially as it's evolved in the 20th century, is pure tyranny, completely unaccountable. You're inside one of these institutions, you take orders from above, you hand it down below. You're outside the institutions under what the libertarians want. There's nothing you can say. The tyrannies do what they feel like. They're global in scale. I mean, this is the extreme opposite of what's been called libertarian everywhere in the world since the Enlightenment. And that's what's called libertarian here. So yeah, it is hard to talk here because you can't use words like libertarian or conservative or anything because they've all come to take their opposite meaning. As for Adam Smith and Wealth of Nations, well, first of all, the idea of a unsubsidized, not state-subsidized capitalism, we don't even have to bother talking about that. It has existed. It exists in a good part of the third world, which is why the third world looks the way it does. It has never existed in any developed society for a very simple reason. The wealthy and the powerful won't allow it, just as Adam Smith understood. They will use the levers of power to make sure that state power subsidizes them. That's why England developed, that's why the United States developed, that's why France developed, that's why Germany developed, that's why Japan developed, and in fact every developed society has developed just that way. That's one of the cliches of economic history. So we don't have to talk about that because it's non-existent, it never will exist, except for people who have it rammed down their throats. Now, am I in favor of it? That's another question. Like in some mythical world, would I like to see laissez-faire capitalism? Well, only under the conditions described by Adam Smith. The real Adam Smith, the one who wrote Wealth of Nations, not the one you worshipped before, but the one who wrote it. And if you look at his argument for markets, it's pretty clear. I mean, maybe the argument's right, maybe it's wrong, but it's clear what it was. The argument was, I repeat, that under conditions of perfect liberty, markets will lead to perfect equality. That's why markets are good, he said. They will lead to perfect equality, and they will not force people to subject themselves to outside orders, so they become less than human, so that the artisan recedes while the art improves, as de Tocqueville put it. Yeah, if that were possible, maybe so, but it's not in the cards, and I don't know if that argument works anyway. Probably doesn't. The argument was fallacious, but the goal was clear. The goal was a society based on Enlightenment values, which is just radically opposed to what today are called libertarian values here in the United States. So there you have to be clear about what you're talking about. But you're right, as I use the terms, it sounds contradictory in the United States. Like, it also sounds contradictory in the United States when people ask me what I think about conservatism, and I say I think I'm probably one of the few conservatives around. Because I actually believe in traditional values. I don't know anybody on public arena who does. So I don't know, to the extent that the term has any meaning, I'm probably a conservative. But that doesn't mean much here. We have to start by decoding a whole system of intellectual distortion before you can even talk. That itself is a big achievement. If terms have lost their meaning, well, it becomes impossible to talk. And that's itself an achievement. Doesn't have to happen, and people with privilege and education can help it not happen.
Hi, this is Roger Leisner for Radio Free Maine.
The printed title for this talk is U.S. International and Security Policy, the Right Turn in Historical Perspective. For some reason, a question mark was added to that, which wasn't intended, but maybe it adds something. You'll notice that the phrase right turn was in quotes. The reason for that is not because the phenomenon is unreal, of course it is real, but rather because it is not, in my view, what it is often thought to be. What I want to discuss is what the right turn really is and how it fits into deeper and much more enduring characteristics of American policy and state policy and society. I'm largely going to restrict attention to international policy here with a few words on security policy towards the end if there's time. But let me stress that this is obviously just a piece of a much larger story which includes domestic issues as well that ought to be brought in. And in the question period we can have a free-for-all and go into anything. Well, to begin with, what's the right turn? This is associated conventionally with the Reagan administration, and in that regard I want to make two comments. First of all, I will refer to Reagan, but when I'm referring to Reagan, I want it to be understood that I do not mean the individual Ronald Reagan, who is in fact largely a creation of the public relations industry, and who literally often does not know and is not expected to know what policies are or what the words on the cue cards mean. That's an interesting fact. It's an interesting fact about American politics, but when I use the term Reagan, I'm not referring to that individual. Rather, I'm referring to the elite groups for whom he serves as a spokesman, or more important, as a device to ensure public acquiescence, or at least public passivity with regard to the policies of the groups who have created him as an image to appear before the public. Second point is that these elite groups constitute one rather extremist segment of a much broader elite consensus. And that is why there's no serious challenge to Reaganite policies within the mainstream, apart from tactical disagreement now and then. We see this on particular occasions. For example, the terrorist bombing of Libya, which is the most serious terrorist act of this year in terms of its scale. The terrorist bombing of Libya in April, at that point, Reagan's sharpest critics, if you look back, people like Anthony Lewis and his congressional critics, they immediately flocked to the jingoist consensus. And more generally, we see this in the way that congressional liberals joined in dismantling the welfare state measures pursuing what's called a Reaganite program. This was allegedly in response to a public mood which demonstrably does not exist. In fact, the major Reaganite programs, including dismantling of welfare state measures, the military buildup, and so on, these were actually initiated under the Carter administration and simply continued, in some cases escalated, under Reagan. The same is true of the U.S. war in El Salvador and much else. So the point is that the right turn is actually much broader than is commonly assumed, and it's furthermore an elite phenomenon. That's important. It's important to bear in mind that the public has been strongly opposed to the major policies of the Reagan administration. This is a fact that is totally irrelevant as long as the public is passive and acquiescent, but it is a demonstrable fact and well known to public opinion analysts. Nevertheless, the right turn is somehow associated with or crystallized in the Reaganite programs. So let's begin to have a look at those. What are the Reaganite programs which supposedly constitute the right turn? Well, they basically fall into three related categories. First, there are the programs which have involved a rather substantial transfer of resources from the poor to the rich. Second program is a large increase in intervention, subversion, international terrorism, and general gangsterism and lawlessness. Third, there has been a huge increase in the state sector of the economy, this in the traditional American way through the military system. The military system serves as a state-guaranteed market for high-technology waste production, with armaments, in other words, or from another point of view, it serves as a device, as a means of state industrial management, a means of forced public subsidy for the most advanced sectors of high-technology industry. In fact, the ratio of state expenditures to gross national product has risen more rapidly under Reagan than at any time since the Second World War, and this fanatic Keynesianism of the Reagan administration has had the predictable consequences, such as the huge deficit. This vast increase in the intervention of the state in the economic system under Reagan has also coincided with other measures taken to strengthen the state relative to the citizenry, measures to protect the state from public scrutiny, to block public discussion, attacks on civil liberties, and so on. These are the three, as I see it, the three major components of the Reagan program: transfer of resources from the poor to the rich, interventionism, lawlessness, gangsterism, and so on, and a huge increase in the power of the state, strengthening the power of the state and its intervention in the economy, its role in state industrial management and in organizing a public subsidy for high technology industry. Well, if you think about these measures, and they are the Reaganite measures, it's clear that the so-called right turn is not a turn towards conservatism, quite the contrary. There happen to be very few conservatives in American politics or in American society. There are few. Mark Hatfield might qualify in the Senate. I'm another one, incidentally, in essential respects, but there are very few of us. And old-fashioned conservatives, like Robert Taft, for example, would turn over in their graves at the way the term is now being used. It is now being used to refer to fanatic Keynesianism, to lawlessness, and to extreme advocacy of welfare state measures, although now a welfare state for the rich, not the poor, as state policy is reshaped even more than it usually is to benefit the privileged and to serve their needs. So this is nothing like conservatism. Now, in this connection, let me make a general observation, which I think is worth bearing in mind. In political discourse, most terms are used with a kind of a technical meaning, which is divorced from and often the exact opposite of their ordinary meaning. Conservatism is a case in point, but there are many other examples. So take, for example, the term democracy. The way that's used in political discourse in the United States is to, and other countries too, is to refer to a system of elite decision with occasional ratification on the part of an irrelevant public. If segments of the usually irrelevant and apathetic public...
Again, they're out of the cigarettes that I want. Fucking hell, that's been happening for weeks. almost just fucking up just then. Maybe about 10% of battery life just then, so. Anyway. Spend a few minutes here then. Walk down to the beachfront and then charge up my phone a bit and head off for work. I think this is going to be early signs that I need a new phone too. So, better upload all the footage to Google Docs before this phone fucking fully cracks it. So it's Good Monday, I'm outside the church. So, bad start to the morning, but I'm okay about it. But, like, this guy looks like jeez. That guy there. I'm here till about 4 o'clock today. I think it's 4. So anyway, I don't think I'm going to see that girl until sometime later in the week. Which I should be saying, so I'm going to spend the day with Reuben tonight. Reuben's a good dude, so I've got to upload. So much work here. Fuck, I really needed some coffee too. Like, I really needed the coffee. No, it's gonna be. Oh, my eyebrows too. I can't believe the markets are on too. Good Monday. But. Go out for a bit. It'll be too. Maybe I should go and do some filming around the markets. I'll document a bit of it. Manly markets. So, work till 4 today. Try to do some film work tonight. It's gonna be a fucking nightmare. I'm so behind in so much shit. Spend the day tomorrow with Reuben. Afterwards, catch up. Life goes on, so tomorrow when I'm with Reuben, I'm not going to use my phone camera because it started to wear out, but I will be using my other camera probably. Was it a good shot or?
I'm gonna do a talking more.
Yeah.
We will at that break.
Okay.
So when you've been working for this go down there.
Yeah. No worries.
start banking. I did squats the other day.
I know. I'm starting to trust me. When you get into your 30s, you start feeling it a lot. Like today, I'm like, I couldn't walk because the amount of work that I've been doing today is still.
Oh man, it's so annoying.
I'm like, oh,
I don't want to get up. Especially when you do strenuous exercise, then you have to
yeah. Sometimes I moan when my alarm goes off. It's like,
Yeah.
I was like, you're alright, dude. I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
I mean, that was one good thing you're doing your 9 to 5 job. It kind of motivated me to get up really early and start my day like 6 a.m.
Yeah.
But also just having done it for like 8 months, it's kind of quite tiring after a while. But it does set up the schedule to wake up quite early, which I quite like. When you're just seeing the sun come up, it's great to wake up. So like another like 10 or 11. Some days I'm half the morning done. I've never been one of those people though to go to the gym like a nearly.
Yes. I'll be out.
You look after more stuff.
I will be looking after.
I'll,
Oh, good. So I'm actually filming that stuff for Reuben. Good. And I got a good view of the Navy base and the Opera House, and underneath the Hard Bridge. Good? Feel better? Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty quiet. Like, as well.
nice though.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I don't know what that is, but it's got info on it, so it's good. Story.
Like a little donkey.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, a little donkey mode. I think they were firing the cannons the other day.
Yeah?
Yeah, I heard this cannon fire. What the fuck is that? They were firing them over here. I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't know they were used.
Yeah.
Yes, boats.
Oh, okay, yeah. This is
I haven't used this in like years. Awesome.
Yeah.
Have you ever climbed it?
No. Walking it too, even the other day, like when I was walking, I was like, alright, like that. I was going, oh fuck. I was like,
It gets quite windy.
yeah. When the trains and the wind hit at the same time, it's just like, oh
It's
fuck.
even worse when you're climbing it. It's good fun, it's quite a thrill.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're scared of heights, probably not recommended.
Yeah.
There's this area especially where you have to climb down. It's pretty frightening, not gonna lie. I don't have vertigo, but I got a bit of vertigo.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is way too much. Set up here.
Yeah, it's up to you, man. Yeah.
Sit there then. You worked on any film sets recently?
No, just my. Yeah, yeah.
Always worry about that. Especially the first line.
No. Sorry, that's a good discussion too. Sorry, I had to stop that.
No, that's
I was like,
okay.
oh
That's a
no,
really nice
it was worth.
question.
I'm like, no, it's worth telling.
It's
so.
worth taking a shot.
Yeah.
It's in the same position anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Water?
Yeah. So I'll put it out.
It's being treated.
I was here last week. It was
Yeah.
closed when I was here.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was really like,
school holidays. They're
Yeah.
usually open slash holidays. You visit it. School is actually
Yeah.
locked there. It's got a bit warm.
yeah, it's good. It's in the sun's good.
Yeah,
yeah, it's
beautiful.
just yeah.
When you're right next to the water.
Yeah, I think because we weren't in the sun before,
Yeah,
so it
that
was
wasn't too bad, but yeah, I felt a little bit
Yeah.
chilly, but
just,
yeah.
yeah, me too. The wind.
Yeah, the Melbourne one looks haunted.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a real creepy vibe. Pretty boring.
Yeah.
Like an episode of Boardwalk Empire.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. You wanna have a look around first, or?
I should learn a park.
Yeah. Film each other. Film
Yeah,
me.
that's right.
Yeah. I'll put it.
Great atmosphere, beautifully shot.
Oh. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, 70s and 80s for Australia.
Oh, yeah. What other Australian movies do you like?
I like The Boys, which is the 90s film. I like Bad Boy W.
Yeah, I've seen that.
That's a
Yeah.
great film. Really like Cozzy, I saw recently.
What's that about?
It's a musical.
Oh,
They're
okay.
essentially a bunch of inmates from a mental institution to a famous Italian opera.
Yeah.
But the problem with the Italian opera is it's incredibly misogynistic.
Oh, okay.
It's essentially the inmates of the institution making their version. It's very comfort watch. Very comfort. It's very lovely. Obviously the first Mad Max.
Yeah.
The second one I like too.
So
The other one's not so much.
Is that the Tina Turner one?
And which one, sorry?
The Tina Turner one?
No, I actually that one I haven't seen. Mad Max 3. I haven't seen it. I have seen 1, 2,
Yeah.
Fury Road. I thought I wasn't interested. It went away from the simplicity and
Yeah.
atmosphere of the first movie. Like, there's so much about that first film.
I think Turner.
Well, but they just haven't really done it.
I think it's not a place for people coming up for it and stuff.
Yeah, it's like those monster.
Yeah. Yeah, and the entire place is just like.
At least they utilize it.
Oh.
something like a porridge.
Yeah.
A porridge. Like a wrap. Yeah, it is.
It's James Bond cars.
Yeah, literally.
Oh. But
Can you imagine how much they cost?
yeah, but the amount of times people stop and look in.
Oh yeah, they'd be sick of it.
Yeah.
Like stuff where it's like, okay, this is not technically illegal. Like, you
Yeah.
know, people talking about, you know, breaking into people's, you know,
Yeah.
tutorials on how to pick locks and break
Yeah,
into people's
that's
cars.
that,
I'm like,
yeah.
oh yeah, that's totally legit. For YouTube, just teaching people how to commit crimes. So like, fair enough. It's shocking when it's like a Japanese lady teaching like live animals.
Yeah, that's that.
Yeah, just a bit of nudity, and you're like, yeah, no, I can't have that. So gross.
Oh, I see.
Still work here.
I'll be out here for a while. Yeah. See you soon. Awesome. This way or that way?
Straight there.
Yeah.
The other way to Stojanovic.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
I like North Sydney.
What's that, sorry?
I like North Sydney.
Yeah. It's so quiet on the weekends. It's fun. There's like no one here on the weekend.
Yeah.
You go to a pub here, and it's like, where is everyone? It's like, oh, no one comes here on the weekend. Like, oh, but people live here. Like, yeah, they don't go to the shops much.
tripod? No, yeah, it's yours, man.
It's missing the lever, but it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I've had this one for like 10 years. Nah, probably less. Served me well, man.
Yeah.
That way.
Oh, yeah. Fuck, I've not been on this bridge in ages.
Yeah, neither.
Yeah.
I was here during lockdown.
Oh, were you?
Nice.
Yeah?
Yeah. Pretty decent. Photo shoots, but
I
there's
know.
no one to shoot, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Your own lunch, as I said. Yeah, yeah, I ain't cheap to eat out here.
Yeah. Now it's true. Oh, fuck. Subway might be not.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You know what?
The piss night.
Yeah.
You got Coles, get like this
Yeah,
food.
something,
Porto
yeah.
just there.
Yeah, I think that might be the case. Fuck. I wouldn't think the Subway would get busy though.
Lunchtime, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's more affordable food. Yeah. Yeah, probably a Porto then, eh?
Yeah? Yeah.
Yeah,
I
Porto. Porto's the one, maybe.
Yeah.
Flavor. Oh, that's the same.
Yeah, I know, see?
No, it's fucking squatting, man.
Yeah,
It just kind of
squatting.
kills you. You start doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't trust Asian food.
Up to you,
So what is it?
whatever.
It's up to you, man. Tell me. Yeah?
Yeah, that's trouble. You have a nice place. My prior landlord's
What else is that? Anyway, what else? Just anything.
Stratford very soon.
How stressful life, anyway.
And he did say he served overseas. I think that he was in Afghanistan. Yeah, just the way he would scream, it sounded like he did have like some form of PTSD or something.
Yeah.
Well, I feel for him. He was not a safe guy to hang out with.
Yeah.
I remember because I have type 1 diabetes, and I was having a bit of a hypo outside. So I had to like sit down because my legs were like shaking. And he's like, "Oh, what's the matter, man?" I said, "Oh, I'm just having a hypo." He's like, "Oh yeah, I know someone who's got that, eh?" I said, "Yeah." It's like, "Yeah, you just shouldn't have a lot of sugar, eh?" I'm like, "I know, actually, it's the complete opposite. You should definitely have sugar if you have a hypo." It's like, really? Because when I had this person, I didn't give him any sugar. I said, "No, that's very dangerous, actually, man.
Yeah.
You can't do that." I was like, "Oh, okay." And he just like really gets kind of aggressive towards it.
Yeah.
After I'm like, "Yeah, no worries, bro." It's a nice one, man. But yeah, he didn't mean harm. It's just after 3 or 4 rants at 2 a.m. in the morning, I was kind of just a bit tired of it. I was like, "Yeah, no, fuck this." So I called the police. I was like, "Yo, can you shut this fucker up? Like, I want to get to sleep." I don't want him to scream at the top of his lungs. So he's gonna go bash some people in the apartments. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not dealing with that." Yeah. But no. Apart from that though, Stratford neighbours boring as shit. You've been in Balgala for a while, eh?
Yeah, 10 years now.
Ah. What do it do at Balgala? I've obviously been to your place a few times, but is there like any
It's close to Manly. Really
yeah,
close.
yeah, of course, yeah. It's a good drive there. That'd be pretty sweet to
It's
have.
kind of it's all right access to the city.
Yeah.
Alright, yeah.
It's more like a good kind of suburb to be
Yeah.
positioned, to where the beaches,
Yeah.
the city. Yeah, fair enough. Do you hear about the fucking crowd that was here when Logan Paul and KSI were here?
No. Oh, well, they come to North Sydney.
They were on Channel 9 and these people lined up like 10 hours apparently just to fucking check. Logan Paul was there. I was like, wow. Why would you wait that long to see that?
He's in wrestling now.
Is he? Yeah, he did say he served overseas. I think that he was in Afghanistan. Yeah, just the way he would scream, it sounded like he did have like some form of PTSD or something.
Yeah.
Well, I feel for him. He was not a safe guy to hang out with.
Yeah.
I remember because I have type 1 diabetes, and I was having a bit of a hypo outside. So I had to like sit down because my legs were like shaking. And he's like, "Oh, what's the matter, man?" I said, "Oh, I'm just having a hypo." He's like, "Oh yeah, I know someone who's got that, eh?" I said, "Yeah." It's like, "Yeah, you just shouldn't have a lot of sugar, eh?" I'm like, "I know, actually, it's the complete opposite. You should definitely have sugar if you have a hypo." And it's like, "Really?" Because when I had this person, I didn't give him any sugar. I said, "No, that's very dangerous, actually, man. You can't do that." I was like, "Oh, okay." And he just like really gets kind of aggressive towards it. After I'm like, "Yeah, no worries, bro." It's like a nice one, man. But yeah, he didn't mean harm. It's just after 3 or 4 rants at 2 a.m. in the morning, I was kind of just a bit tired of it. So yeah, no, fuck this. So I called the police. I was like, "Yo, can you shut this fucker up? Like, I want to get to sleep. I don't want him to scream at the top of his lungs. Like, he's gonna go bash some people in the apartments." I'm like, "No, I'm not dealing with that." Yeah. But no. Apart from that though, Stratford neighbours boring as shit. You've been in Balgala for a while, eh?
Yeah, 10 years now.
What do they do at Balgala? I've obviously been to your place a few times, but is there like any...
It's close to Manly. Really
yeah,
close.
yeah, of course. That'd be pretty sweet to have.
It's all right access to the city.
Yeah.
Alright, yeah.
So it's more like a good kind of suburb to be
Yeah.
positioned, to where the beaches,
Yeah.
the city. Yeah, fair enough. Do you hear about the fucking crowd that was here when Logan Paul and KSI were here?
No. Oh, well, they come to North Sydney.
They were on Channel 9 and people lined up like 10 hours apparently just to fucking check. Logan Paul was there. I was like, wow. Why would you wait that long to see that?
He's in wrestling now.
Is he?
Logan's doing WWE.
Of course. Yeah, whatever gets you the most money, I suppose. Useless prick is. Yeah. Apparently their drinks aren't very good either. Not big up in what's it called, pump.
Oh, yeah. Fuck, Subway's still got a line.
Yeah. I haven't had Subway in ages. I got addicted to it when I worked a job over in Lane Cove, but that was because it was the only place to eat.
Yeah.
But after that, I just kind of fell out of Subway. Just felt like shit every time I had it. Like, done with Subway. I don't really go for any of the takeaway joints like that anymore. If I'm gonna go to Mac's, I'm probably gonna have just like a soft serve Coke, really. Don't bother with anything else. What'd you get up to during Easter?
No, just work. I did work Friday, work Saturday.
Extra money?
Yeah. Yeah, and
Was it busy?
Yeah, it was really, really busy. Normally payday's Mondays because it was public holiday. The payroll officer wasn't there.
Oh, really?
So we're all kind of
Nice. Yeah, typical. I suppose they got to get a bit of holiday too. That's alright. They treat you alright though?
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of restaurants were having like 15-25% surcharge
Yeah.
or holiday surcharge, which is a bit bullshit. I'm just like, I thought you would make your money back just on that Monday alone for being open, because everyone wanted to get out of the house as soon as possible. So why you would need a surcharge?
Oh, the pay rates.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It may be. Yeah, you're right. Actually, it would be the pay rates. Yeah, I'm just thinking 15-25% surcharge. Pretty hefty. Especially if you're going like a restaurant experience, it's quite a lot of money as an additional.
Not anymore.
Yeah. There's almost, I don't know.
Yeah, keep it clean as well.
I take you have to wear like a hair.
Hospitals and airlines and shit like that.
Yeah, you see some pictures and stuff that the health definitions and safety features are a bit problematic. Like, yeah, you don't want a chef to like scratch themselves.
Oh, you shouldn't be
shed
doing that
hair
with
too
girls.
much. Yeah. So I can understand wanting like quite strict rules on like hair and beard design, but as long as you don't shed a lot of hair, it should be fine. I always thought it was stupid though when we had to do it for school.
Yeah.
I always got into trouble over hair. Like my hair now's fine, but when I was younger, I used to like really grow a lot of hair. And despite me being a goody two shoes at school, I got so many detentions as a result of my hair and not shaving enough. Because they were just like, "No, you need to keep it to a certain stand, Reuben." And like, I don't want to. And they're like, "Well, detention for you." Alright. They would have gotten like at least 30 or 40 detentions out of just purely that. It's so stupid. It's so Christ. I just wanted to like leave me be, please. Something like that shouldn't be so strict about. I understand in a work environment, but school, sorry, who gives a crap? You know, it's silly to have to uphold such a strict rule on hair. And as long as you don't like have piercings in your tongue or anything like that, like you're going to high school. Also, it destroys any form of individuality. I feel like you don't let them wear what they want, or do what they want, which gets them into nice little top-ton bots by the time they get to work. It's like, oh, everyone has to dress the same. Presentable. Gives a shit. Sorry, that's my 9 to 5 rant. Having been part of it, so it's a little bit annoying having to follow these kind of rules and presentations. It's nice though when you wake up in the morning and you do present yourself nicely. I also feel like there should be a bit of experimentation as well with letting people slide over certain things. They can be quite strict at times. So.
No. Film me.
I'll film you.
Yeah, this is you got enough.
I've got enough B-roll, and I feel like the interview.
That's up to you, man.
Also, just because of how busy it is here.
Yeah. Well, if you're happy with your project,
Position. I'll also do some more experimentation videos down the line. I've just got to write some scripts.
Yeah, that's cool.
Down the line.
Or you hit me up if you want.
Yeah, I want to do kind of more experimental documentaries.
Yeah, start small. Oh, there's lots of good docos out there.
There are, I need to watch some more documentary filmmaking as well. Every year there's always new ones.
Yeah.
From all around the world. There's this film that came out recently about a donkey, apparently.
Yeah.
It's like set in Poland, just about a donkey.
Yeah.
I'm just like, that's experimental filmmaking if ever I saw it, but it's cute. I haven't seen it yet, but yeah, quite interesting. Are you into Polish cinema?
I haven't seen a lot of it.
Yeah. I saw this one, was it Polish or Czech? I can't remember. It was one that was unfinished. It was like a science fiction one. It was essentially like Lord of the Flies, but on a different planet. Essentially, where they have this time distortion, so people age quite quickly. So eventually gets to the stage where they build a form of like Jesus Christ figure. So it's essentially talking about how no matter what humanity or no matter what planet humanity will go to, they'll always go back to the same flaws and criticisms of Earth, where they'll try and bring peace to each other and create like a peaceful society, but ultimately human frailty and lust and all the things that make humanity will crumble the societies no matter what on whatever planet. It's interesting, but it's a bit of a slog. It's like 3 hours long. But, it's got some interesting concepts in it. It's unfinished too, so some of the scenes in it are just narrated because of stuff he never shot.
Yeah.
Because it was before he finished the film. It was in Poland. The Polish government took it from him and they're like, you're not allowed to shoot anymore. So only about 70% of the film was actually finished, and for the rest of it's essentially just him narrating the script, saying what would have been shot.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. Experimental filmmaking. Not the most entertaining of films. It's interesting enough. I don't know, stuff quite fascinating just from a behind the scenes perspective.
It's this Chinese documentary called West of the Tracks.
Which one, sorry?
West of the Tracks, I think. It's
Oh,
called.
yeah.
The English title. And it's about how this train station stopped coming to this town, this industrial town. It's this 10-hour movie how this town's just going to fall apart because there's no transport in and out of it.
Oh god.
It's like 10 hours.
10 hours. This is a good ending.
Yeah. I've watched bits and pieces.
Yeah. I don't know if I could sit down for that long.
That's the thing. Like, it's apparently like only museums strolled in parts occasionally.
Yeah. I know there's like documentaries like the Holocaust movie Shoah and stuff that are like 9 hours long. But I'm like, while I am a sucker for punishment like that, watching shit like that. Like obviously I've seen the Lord of the Rings extended edition, all 3 of them in one go, but sitting down for like 9 hours on a documentary, which I'm sure is very well made. It's a big time. Like I'm bad when it comes to binge watching a TV show for 9-10 hours, let alone a movie documentary for 9 hours. I think the only way I could watch it is if I actually got a ticket to it in a movie theater and I was forced to watch it. If I had the choice,
you set yourself up for it.
Yeah, essentially, you're in a theater setting and you're having to watch it. Push yourself to watch it then. I guess, definitely wouldn't do it out of my own accord. Or like that. Even though I'm sure it's great, it's way too long. Good to see a lot of people around again. Back to the way things were. Do you have any Easter egg hunts on the weekend? Grown out of that?
Yeah. I think so. That's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Just fill me with joy. More of I feel like my addiction for junk food is chips. I'm still a sucker for chips.
Yeah.
Chocolates I can easily do without for ages. Things like donuts, chocolates and stuff. Just don't hit me. Yeah, interesting.
We'll take a seat here.
Take a seat?
Yeah, on here. Yeah.
Break my legs.
So what are you going to do with this documentary things you're doing?
So essentially my idea is I've been watching a lot of interviews or documentary filmmaking on YouTube, interviewing people from all walks of life. There's a series, it's quite popular, I have to name the channel now. It's one where they famously interview like an inbred family. I can't remember what the channel was called.
Soft white underbelly?
What's it called?
Soft white underbelly?
Yeah, that one. Yes. There was that. And that got me in kind of like a rabbit hole of like interview, documentary filmmaking, of just interviewing people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just got me into this kind of interest about not only just interviewing people in reality, but also maybe like creating fictional kind of
Reality,
interviews, where it's just like getting an actor to play a character.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, I'm definitely interested in that kind of journalism aspect. I've always been interested in reading up and writing about people. But yeah, I'm curious about an idea for a series of discussing people in Sydney, which isn't. I know I'll need to play into like the TikTok crowd as well in order to do well, but I don't want to do like trashy kind of like making fun of people kind of shit. I wanted to do like very natural kind of interviewing videos, content which isn't just like purely. I don't want that level of exploitation, I suppose. Like, if you're going to interview, a hooker or a drug addict or something like that, I don't want it to be exploitative. I want it to be more like natural, like down to earth. Get that kind of story. Because I feel like Sydney, despite all its kind of flaws, there's a lot of interesting stories out here of people who've made it big from small beginnings, and people who made it big and then ended up, very kind of squalor or shit situations. I feel like there's a lot of really interesting stories in Sydney to talk about. So that's kind of my goals for this series, I suppose, is take something that I really, really love, and I think I'm very good at, and approach it to a more kind of artistic.
That's a good YouTube channel. So it's right on.
It is, yeah. Like some of it's a bit tacky, and I know some of them have been live, like staged and stuff. But what I do like about that channel is he doesn't like criticize that they were a bad person. You're just hearing from their perspective who they were, getting their story. That's definitely what I'm interested in doing. Is not criticizing them or abusing them or exploiting them, but just hearing kind of their perspectives. It's quite common for movies and TV shows to exploit these kind of people. I suppose it's a bit on topic. One thing I've always been kind of pissed off at is the way internet homebodies are perceived in the media. In regards to sort of the incel community and stuff like that. I feel like a lot of people who are supposedly into the internet are just perceived as creeps and rapists and serial killers and murderers, but this is generally a community of people who are quite socially awkward and just can't quite communicate outside or work in general society, that I feel like depicting them in that same image of, they're degenerates and stuff's a bit fucked up. There was this movie I saw last year which I found really interesting because it was one of the first times I really thought they properly depicted internet people, where it was seen as a rather lonely profession, but it wasn't seen as creepy. Like there was this character in it where he could easily have been. I was expecting him to go into the perspective of an older, like pedophile kind of character, because he's essentially in the story talking to this young girl who's like 17, 18 years old, and so you think, of course they're going to go to the, he's a pedophile perspective. But they don't. It was taken as he just wanted to be a friend of hers and actually show support for her. And it's because he was quite lonely. So yeah, I find that a lot of the media's depiction of people like this is really base, simplistic. They're all depraved. It's its own level of community out there. The internet's a huge place. It's created its own sense of community on these forums. This is right there, apparently. So it's like one of those balconies where, what's his name? Stojanovic?
Oh, fuck, what was that? See? What was that? Yeah. Yeah, I know. Everyone stick around. Yeah.
Some nice pubs around here, you want to check them out?
Okay.
Not bad.
No, that one.
Uh, very much in the center of the city now. Hotels versus. So a few of my mates have had birthdays recently.
Yeah.
My roommate's 21st at the moment. It's changing ages now around me. What's going on? Must have been a year or a month of birth for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, period. Pretty sure you've seen me in this jacket before.
Probably, yeah.
Right, need to get a bigger one. Me in this jacket, we've been through lots. Is there a piece of clothing that you have
Just
kind of
latch on.
sentimental value for?
Probably, yeah.
I often find though the pieces of uniform that have a lot of sentimental value for I chuck out after like 5 years because I just wear it too much. But the old styles of clothes last a long time though, so I find that they can last a good 20 years or so if you have to look after them enough.
It's like we did a loop.
So what's that?
We did like a loop.
A what?
We did like a loop around
A
the
loop
block,
around, yeah.
Up here?
Yeah, but yeah, well, North Sydney's quite small, so
I know, it feels so big, like.
yeah, all how big the buildings are. But it's only like probably like a K or so of buildings. That's it, really. That's why it's so funny coming in during the weekend.
Yeah.
It's so quiet. Just get used to it all. Have all the office works and convenience stores everywhere, but just no one's there during the weekend. Oh, essentially out. It's not work hours. Well, let's learn to go to these.
Alright, awesome.
Yeah,
outdoor.
stuff.
Yeah.
Should I find out where they all are?
I know where that one is, but
Yeah, that can be a fun experience. A date for the missus, maybe. Looks lovely. Indeed it does.
yeah. What did he say? What did he say?
It looks lovely. I assume he was talking about
Yeah.
He's talking about me, ultimately. Corporate life, yay or nay?
No.
Yeah. We do dress well though. Yeah. It's kind of nice. Have you been to Adelaide?
No. Oh, this place here, number 50.
Number 50.
They always advertise for staff.
Oh really?
Always. Which is
Think
not
that's a bad.
Yeah, it's not a good look, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's actually a front for child labour or cocaine coming through the country. People report it, they go missing. Needs to be.
This place? Or?
Yeah.
Hang on.
May not be open.
Hang on one sec.
Oh. scared, are you?
No, it's good.
The future, do apps.
What was that?
What was what?
The tabs thing.
Oh, it's the way you order food.
You don't order at the bar?
You can, but they prefer if you do it at the table now. Yeah, it's a bit odd. It's a no bueno for me. There's so much not on off. What's going on here, boys and girls? There's nothing on offer. Disgusting. Yeah, fucking disgusting. I will not allow this. This is... looks like it's just alcohol in the menu, boy. That's disgusting. Fine man. Words. Get my card details. Very nice.
Did you order? No.
No, I drank water. I should drink more water, but no, for the most part I don't do it.
So you didn't order anything? You didn't order anything?
Oh, no. Oh, sorry. I thought you said water. No, I did an OJ. Just a plain OJ. Didn't have a lot on up with the food. Just like pies and shit. It was really looking forward to it. It's a bit much.
So I don't drink. I've not been in a pub in ages. So.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, pub's alright.
Yeah.
Do you have good ones local to you? Or?
Yeah, yeah. I just don't go.
Fair enough. Yeah, I've gotten to that age now where I enjoy it every once in a while, but I don't enjoy it every weekend.
Yeah.
Especially with COVID happening. It was a relief to go back to the pub, obviously, after COVID. I find that I don't go every weekend now. It's not fun. Let you take. OJ point, mate. Is it fun? Oh, yeah, it would be actually. OJ goodness. Oh, wait, just be careful. Are you guys still friends or?
No, I guess we're on speaking terms.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to have if I have like and myself up in a kind of extra relationship that we can still be friends kind of thing, but at least from my experiences it usually hasn't ended up like that.
You shouldn't? No.
Well, like you try to retain a relationship afterwards, but it's kind of like, yeah, probably best of us that we probably don't. Because you have a form of like jealousy and just like all sorts of shit goes down where you feel just kind of shit breaking up with each other.
So what's the girl like now?
My partner?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's doing well. Started a new job recently. Yeah, just basically setting up moving out.
Yeah.
We're thinking of buying a home. Yeah, just moving on from rent life essentially. Trying to get into gear of what's going on.
That's it.
So,
Okay.
oh yeah. Oh nice. Yeah, she's very pretty.
Yeah.
Alright, so you two
Our mutual friends.
mutual friends. Yeah, she's very pretty. Oh, very good. Yeah. It's interesting when you look back on it. How long ago have you? Yeah. Yeah, I've been with my partner for 15 months now. I don't know. I feel like at this stage we're not we're serious, sure, but there's also like areas where we need to go a bit further before we trust each other in certain departments. But we definitely want to test out the waters and moving in together and seeing what living together will be like. Yeah, no, I love it over the bits. It's been a really fun ride so far, so yeah, see how it goes essentially. Sydney's bloody expensive though, as always, but yeah, it'll be fun spending time with her, having that ability of living together. I've, for the most part, lived with roommates, so it'll be interesting to live with someone that I consider my partner. But as I've always thought, even though a partner is very important to you, I don't think it should be the most important. So, friendships are as critical in my opinion.
That's her profile pic. She caught me out.
Hello.
She's caught me out of that.
Oh, what a dickhead. What a dickhead. Yeah, they can be douchey sometimes. The way they handle breakups. Yeah, I've had some funny stories.
Just check out this Instagram. It's like creatures of manly. Yeah.
Oh god.
The fairies.
The good old fairy. I love how there's like a separate account of creatures of man. The place has some real wild people. Some real wild characters.
It's fucking hilarious though.
Yeah. Yeah, Manly's great. I mean, it's got a bunch of really weird characters. I remember the guy there once who looked like something out of a David Lynch film. Who was just really weird and very, like, he would speak in rhymes essentially. He wouldn't like talk to you.
This is two types of people at Manly Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Ready? Two types of people Sunday morning.
Hungover as hell. After a long bash, just sleeping on the sea, or wild as hell. Yeah, it attracts a lot of wild characters. A lot of tourists as well. A lot of tourists and a lot of international people. I've met a lot of British tourists there. Oh, there was this Irish couple there. I'll never forget. Really nice couple, but had one of those things which you just could not fully understand. So like I would say 60% of what they said I understood. 40% I was just like, no. And I'm pretty good with accents, but this was a big accent. It's really hard to understand.
Hey,
Hey, you going, brother?
Yeah.
What, you doing a podcast or something?
Yeah, we're doing like a vlog thing.
A vlog? What is vlogging?
Just basically general life and just how things are going. So some of it's real, some of it's not. Just kind of experimental stuff.
Beautiful. I do have a lot of life experiences.
Damn straight. What have you been up to, mate?
Man, women can get us locked up like that.
Yeah.
Like I got a probably a restaurant at the moment. I
Oh,
think.
really?
Yeah.
Damn, son.
You wanna smoke?
That's no
You
good.
want one or?
But you're loving the bits though, right?
Yeah.
You know what? When you fall in love, love is better than any other drug that you can ever get.
Yeah, that's true. It can be dangerous though, as a
Yes.
result. Yes.
Because no matter what, they get you locked up, no dramas in the world.
Yeah.
But they can ring and you can drop absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Forget about everything you had planned, like all your little plans they had planned when you get out or whatever.
Yeah.
You come out and you're like, alright, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna work on hard, bang.
Yeah.
She can ring and just everything can just drop.
Yeah.
I was thinking about turning gay.
Plans with the
I was
boss.
thinking about turning gay. You know what I mean?
The thing is with turning gay is that the lifestyle of the gay community is quite attractive. It's like, just fuck everything you say, just don't worry about
go
the
for it,
next
eh?
day. Yeah, it's just like, alright, let's go for it.
Also, like I've had a very, very, very. I don't know if you believe in like if you're gifted or not. Like I'm not a drug addict. I don't touch-
Gifted in regards to just like skills
Like,
or
no, I wish.
Yeah.
You mean that?
yeah,
But I've always had that gift. Say like it only works in certain times, but say my heart rate or if I get really like scared, I can kind of predict someone's future.
right, interesting.
It's nuts, isn't it?
Yeah, have you found that from time and time again? It's
It's just
predicted
true
to be
and
okay?
true
Yeah.
and true and true. Like,
Okay.
you know the guy that plays in the NFL?
Which guy?
There's a guy that plays in the NFL.
Yes.
Alright? I've seen him training at, we drink all the time. We're at Belmont Oval.
Yep.
We're sitting there having a beer waiting for the next job.
Yep.
I seen this guy drop. And I seen all the other guys just keep on jogging. So I jumped out of the car, ran straight to
Helping
him.
out, yeah.
And like, man, I put my hand on his chest. Just felt it. I felt it. I was like, my heart was starting to fucking...
Shit, he was having a bit of a heart attack. or
Yeah,
something.
or
Yeah.
he's got like a heart murmur or something, but
Yeah,
he's got
right.
the head something. But I said to him, rugby league's not for you, NFL's for you. He just signed a $100 million contract.
Shit. Fuck yeah.
Another time, like, my best mate.
Yeah.
My best mate. Like, I'm talking,
One of the greats.
put my hand on his chest.
Yeah.
Couldn't breathe. I should have dropped him. I said, you're going to drown, man. I said, do not ever go swimming without me, buddy. Please, do not ever jump
Was he a
off.
good swimmer or?
He was strong. He was
Yeah.
a good Aussie bloke, you know?
Yeah.
I said, do not go without me. Jumped off a rock in the Winds River, died.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's sad as shit. I knew it too, like I felt it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like this is where it all stems from, like I don't know. My uncle said he was gonna rape me. I said, you're not gonna fucking rape me, you fucking dirty cunt.
Yeah,
Yes I am,
exactly.
yes I am. We're in the car. Prayed to God. Like I'm religious, big religious, but
Yeah,
I feel
you have
like
a bit
God-
of-
I feel like God's got my back. Good. Like I feel like at a young age I've had a lot of pain. I used to pray to pretty badly, like get me out of this shit. And I said, please get me out of this, please get me out of this. Sun just come out of the clouds and shined on two girls. And I said, yeah. And leave these two girls. He went nuts.
Right.
He dropped me off. He goes, what do I do with you? Just drop me off.
Yeah, right.
They dropped me off on the side of the street. This is way out of bush, like I'm talking like
Yeah.
South Coast,
pretty
place
far
like
out.
Sussex, you know?
Okay. So a good drive out, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bang, he done it, got a conscience. So I ran back, probably 2 or 3 K, ran all the way back, ran back to him, and I was trying to hit him with that stick. And there was another girl there. I was like, she goes, oh, he's just doing it, he won't stop, he won't stop. Just ask for help, Rob, just ask for help. And I was trying to hit him. And then she didn't ask. And I still regret it to this day, not doing it, but I was a 10-year-old kid, full grown man. You know what I mean? But that's where the strength came, and I really did. And ever since then, it's happened maybe 50 other times as well.
Yeah. Did your uncle ever get a comment?
Yeah, I eventually had the guilt wore on me, and then, you know what it was, Teacher. You know, you ever watch The Block?
Yeah.
Well, you know, there was 2 people on there, Sticks and a guy with a big beard. South Coast. That was her partner. So they got in front of me, investigated it, followed me, and find out where I was at.
Yeah.
This guy was following me for weeks, man. I was like, where is this guy? And I pulled up the server on there and I said,
That'd be kind of weird.
I was
Oh,
like,
follow you.
what the fuck's going on here?
Yeah.
I said, what's your problem, buddy? So let's sort it out. He goes, oh, nothing. I said, because I'm just watching you for time. I said, well, you just tell that someone, here's my phone number, ring me. Scotty can come to my house. I said, here's my address. He goes, I know where you live. I said, come to my house. And he's trying to explain to me what happened. I said, well, tell her to come to me and I can speak to her. And then we eventually combined together and got charged.
Yeah, right, good.
I think he got 10 years.
Yeah, good. Well, no, I'm glad. Sometimes people like that don't ever get caught and they just,
And out of there, like,
no.
you know what I mean?
Well, no, I'm glad something came out of it though. But no, that's interesting because I've never had like a spiritual kind of awakening or had like any of that kind of stuff happening. Never really.
You have to open up to it.
Yeah. No,
Seriously,
yeah.
like,
I mean,
it won't just happen.
Yeah.
And it will only ever happen when you're, how do I explain this? Very super excited.
Yeah.
Like you could be doing that for other things or.
Sure.
And
But
most
like
of the time is when near-death experiences.
Yeah, well,
or someone else is about to die.
yeah. I mean, I've experimented like psychedelics and stuff, and
You mean drugs?
yeah, like LSD and stuff like that. And I've never had like I've had forms of like out of body experiences, but never like a spiritual kind of thing. Like that.
I've always smoked weed all my life.
Yeah.
I'm a weed smoker, but
Yeah.
weed's more of a mellower.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
calms you down.
Do you do medicinal now or?
I don't, but I haven't.
Yeah. That's quite good stuff.
What do you mean medicinal? Where you get it from the pharmacy?
Yeah, from pharmacy. Yeah.
It's probably weed.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But you need
It's quite strong apparently, but yeah. It's pretty
I went to Cairns for Christmas and seen my sister, and while I was at Cairns, I was at the pub. $2,000. And I'll go beside me, and I said, "Oh, here's $200 bucks." And she goes, "You got this weed." And she got it from the fence. She had to break the seal off at night. That's weed.
Yeah, I've been told.
The best weed I ever had. But then my brother-in-law only smokes for a vape.
Yeah.
He doesn't smoke the old one.
A lot of people.
Old joint or nothing.
Yeah.
And the vape.
Yeah.
The vape, the first time I ever had a vape, you draw that hard on it, you always just smoke it.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. Yeah. No, but it's funny. One of my mates who did a bit of dealing in that in the past, he's just like, yeah, don't be a dealer now because medicinal has taken over. Not getting any money anymore because everyone's just buying medicinal now, which is more expensive, I've heard. But yeah, it's like quality.
It's because of tax.
The tax, yeah.
I wouldn't mind paying a little bit more knowing it's legit.
And it's good stuff. Exactly right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Than going to someone's house and getting it. You know what I mean? You don't know what you're buying. And then half
No
the
doubt.
time, isn't that little sketchy feeling like, am I going to get my money back? Or
Yeah, is it going to be good stuff? Or is it just going to be dirt,
how
essentially?
is that? All the drug dealer is a friend with everyone. That's what they try to persona themselves as.
Yes, and they do come off as like, yeah, you can trust me.
Yeah,
and
I'm your mate, come around and come
Oh
around
yeah,
too.
chuck you some pre-rolls.
And to a mate's there that's not the dealer, it's normally his mates that takes advantage of those.
Yes, correct.
So you live local?
No, very far.
Bagala.
team.
Bagala. Yeah.
Where's that?
North.
Towards Manly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm west suburbs, so close to Canterbury.
Oh, yep. I'm from Brisbane.
Oh, nice.
That's alright. Yeah.
Yep. Out the west there, like, we're right in the foothills of the Blue Mountains.
Yeah.
What brings you to North Sydney?
No roofers.
Oh, very good. Very
Why?
good.
You just knocked off?
No. We're still working.
Still working.
On workouts.
No, but they're in there chatting away. It's the main builder guy we got all our work through.
Yeah.
So, my mate, one that, my mate who died, his brother.
Oh, right.
I work for him now. It's crazy, it's like a full circle. And they even said it that
well,
day.
I imagine you would have known him for so many years too, so it's like a good kind of friendship still.
Connection.
Oh, good.
You know,
Okay.
like, he doesn't yell, doesn't scream, he's pretty chilled.
That's nice. And you travel around Sydney doing jobs.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, man. It's a good industry to get into these days.
Roofing.
So, yeah.
You can't live without a roof.
True. It's one of the necessities.
You can't live without a roof.
It's a lot
So
harder.
what site can I look? What do you look? What you on
It's on
YouTube?
YouTube, yeah.
What's it called?
His is Knowledge Bearable. It's his YouTube channel. It's a lot of kind of experimental videos and kind of art production stuff. But yeah, he has it on.
Hey, seriously, man, I reckon I could be a YouTuber.
Yeah, you should.
I've just got that. I'll just get my tooth fixed.
Well, get YouTube and
Don't
also
do like,
Yeah.
stand out.
Nah,
YouTube will be good, and also TikTok. I know TikTok's a bit of
I reckon I
a
could get followers. Oh, seriously.
yeah. TikTok's if you find the right market,
Yeah.
TikTok's a really good industry to get
Yeah.
into. It is.
So I got just over 2,000 people.
2,000 people.
Yeah, yeah.
So what is some of your videos, ready?
Yeah.
What's this stock?
Oh, it's stock photos. Yeah.
Stock footage.
Yeah.
What's that? Just of
The things that I filmed, but I couldn't use it for anything, but I just put them all together. So that makes instead of wasting, some of the popular ones. Like,
Do you get paid or?
yeah, a bit. Yeah.
How much?
Probably average at the moment. The lowest I've ever been paid is just over $100, but the most I've been paid from Google is probably 800.
A week or month or?
A month. And
month.
It's a little bit of cash.
Yeah.
It feels
It's
good.
not that, and it's tax free, isn't it? You don't have to declare it or nothing.
No. That's from Google, but I got PayPal and too. So probably on
People
average,
do chuck it.
Yeah.
Once you get 1,000 followers, that's where it starts to get into like the category of like, okay, we can do
so
something with this.
average each week, I'd have to probably go anywhere from 200 to 600 a week.
Oh shit!
Yeah, it's relaxing.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
I reckon I could do it, man.
Yeah.
Seriously, you just got to find that little bit of a niche market and hit them.
You'd be surprised. Like you go on
Like,
TikTok.
what sort of ideas do you have cooking?
I do documentary-based stuff. I just show up with a place like here in this film.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind
Why
of
don't you
niche.
look
kind
at
of sydney
homeless or
markets.
look at
That's
that's a big market, man.
Yeah, I've done that. Yeah.
Like just
The government also pays as well for history reasons, historical reasons. So okay,
you could find out how many people are living in this area at once.
So
And
what they do, what the government does, say you film the Harbour Bridge, right, for a couple of weeks, right, film it, document it, and what you do, you sell that footage to the government, and they keep it for history reasons. So they put it. Yeah.
You should give me a number. We go to the club and just find. You know, I see him on YouTube all the time.
Yeah.
Walk around, just asking random questions to
Yeah.
people, man. And
Yeah,
I'm
it's
the
a
most.
big-
I'm not scared of asking any person.
It's a
any
big
question.
industry interviewing people on the spot.
Oh man, and
It is.
I've got no qualms of asking anyone any question. None. Like seriously, I would not even shame about
It's
it.
a good market, because people like those kind of wacky kind of answers or just like reaction videos kind of stuff. So,
I watch YouTube quite a bit.
Yeah.
And old mate's got 200. I don't know if it's billion or million. You know that Mr. Beast?
Yeah.
No, I'm in for Brave. Yeah.
I don't mind him.
Yeah.
I like his videos. He's always got something a little perky and someone's winning something. So it's always decent, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's quite industry. I know a few
Or
people.
make a video, pretend money that someone's going to win 10 grand if they can hold their hand on Anzac Stitcher the longest or something. You just need to get one investor and invest that money to start. It's just sad.
You don't even need a lot of equipment for something like that either.
No.
Like you just need
And-
maybe like a couple of cameras.
A couple of cameras and maybe 500 or I reckon 5 grand. 5 grand to make it, put 5 grand on it. I could put my hand on something for a month. Imagine that. Doing a shit while you're fucking sitting there.
Yeah.
Hey, get a bucket. How bad?
Come on, onto me, onto
you don't
me.
see that, do you? You kind of, they don't show
To
the
certain,
people,
yeah, got to be because YouTube shows stuff like that. Like,
they
nah.
don't show the shitting part,
As,
do
as
they?
long as you refer to it and don't be like explicit about it, you should be
Because you
fine.
hear people sitting on swings for 48 hours. They
Yeah.
had to do a shit.
Oh yeah.
Like he had the one with the Lambo. Everyone on the hand on the Lambo. Yeah, someone's got to do a shit. Like seriously, I'll just shit on someone's leg. Yeah, you gotta know.
Oh, right.
Don't you reckon?
Not into the shit market, but it's an untapped market for sure.
It's untapped.
Untapped market.
Untapped. I reckon.
But yeah, no. It's,
Alright, wait, give me 2 seconds to think about what I'm going to say. What do you want me to hit? Give me like something to string on.
What did you do Easter weekend?
Ready? We recording? Hello, everyone out there. I'm Alan Morris. Easter is a time to give back. Alright? It's your turn to give to someone else. Alright? I know it's easy to say, harder to do, but try it. You never know. Life is good. Put a smile on your dial and everything will be alright. Alan Morris, signing out.
That's a good one.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
I've got probably 5 of them, 6 of them if you want them.
That's so.
Yeah?
That's so cute.
Give me another one.
Christmas, birthdays, or whatever. Christmas, birthdays.
When you're feeling
give me something that we can actually.
When you're feeling
raunchy,
down.
we can actually. Oh, put them down.
When
That's
you're feeling
a
down.
good one.
When you're
That
feeling down.
is a good one.
When you're feeling down.
Give me 5 seconds. Can
No.
we smoke?
Yeah, of course. We're into natural recording. We don't like the whole stage bullshit.
Give me a second. Give me the countdown.
3, 2, 1.
Alan Morris back again from Channel 9. Joking. Nah, but we're here to discuss something that is a little less happiness that anyone wants to talk about. You know, we're talking about depression now. Every single person in the world has felt it. And if they haven't, they're lying, because depression starts at the smaller stages. It starts from, do I pick up that extra bit of meat, or do I have that extra sausage? You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, you need to look at who you are, who you want to be. Life is pretty simple. You want something, go and get it. Seriously, go and get it. Life is simple. And we have got no boundaries as humans. No boundaries. We can do whatever we want. But we also need to take care of the environment, take care of each other. As much as everyone wants to just put their own foot forward, and I find this a lot in the city. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not separating you boys, but the Indians and then people coming through, they are striving for themselves, and I understand that. It's 100% good, but a lot of yous are segregating yourselves to a part where, can we take? I think I shouldn't have went down that path. Hey? I was segregating them, didn't I? I was not gonna do that, and I was like, oh, should I, shouldn't I?
When you're online, yeah, it's always good to keep like an image image and also.
I didn't want it, and then when I hit the Indians and the Pakis and that, I was like, oh shit. You know what I mean? But do you agree? Like, I think a lot of people would agree.
I mean, look, it depends
You
what you're
know,
talking. It depends what you're talking about. I mean, look, they've had to go through a shit ton in their own countries. Like, obviously,
I know they've got
like
out
the
of it.
amount
Half
of.
of them were born here,
But that's the thing. Like, they've had to deal with a lot of poverty themselves and
Yeah.
shit that we living in Sydney never had to deal with. So I'm just kind of like, look, I can't fucking speak for them because they've had to go through a fucking ton of shit that hopefully I never have to deal with. Like, Christ on the crutch, you look at
Alright, give me
overseas.
ready? Yeah. I'm gonna ask for it.
Let's go. Stuff to do on a Wednesday night.
Alright, ready?
Yeah, ready.
Well,
Hey, Alan, take number 2. Alright, now we're gonna hit a subject that's a little bit personal to some people and unpersonal. Sexuality. Alright, where do we start? But anyone that does have that feeling or that little bit of, how do I explain it, urge, or don't be shy of it. Go for it, boyfriend. Come on. You know what I mean? Life is what you're gonna make of it. If you are happy, that's all that matters. Anything else will fall into place. Alright? At the end of the day, we are one. And together, we can make one amazing country, man. Alright? Not bad? Hey, if you make money on that shit, look me up, bro.
I will look you up.
What's your name? Almar. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah.
See you later.
That's okay.
Look after yourself, mate.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Does that mean it was
That's cute.
racist?
Huh? He was getting to that, so I was like, oh no, don't say that, no.
Yeah.
Nah, he was alright. I was a bit worried we were going to be talking about sexuality. I'm like, oh no, this is going. No, that's sweet. See, that's what happens when you go to the pub. You meet some colourful characters. Can't go wrong.
Initially, I didn't want to stick it all. I'm like, I was recording it. I'm like, okay, it's alright.
Well, keep it recording just in case you find some interesting.
Yeah, no, I kept it recording, but I didn't want to put it up.
For sure, you don't want it to be like that, yeah. Because you might get shy in front of the camera or be angry about that. That's fair enough.
It's alright.
Well, hey. Well, that's the thing. Like, I kind of want to do things like that where it's just a person who's willing to speak their mind. I'd even keep it recording if they were like saying like racially confusing stuff or stuff that we consider.
He seemed really Australian.
Very much so. But I'd also want to kind of hear the perspective of someone who does have opinions that wouldn't be considered very, like, iffy. I would interview a person who is fascistic or Nazi kind of like these. I'm like, hey, fuck it, who gives a shit? Just interview them. You may not agree with their point of views, but it's best to record stuff like that just to get the perspective down. Even if you don't entirely agree with them, you shouldn't completely just have all opinions be right. It's part of the course of videotaping, getting everyone's perspective. Not bad, getting good shots. I think we handled that alright.
That's why I was a bit quiet. I'm like, if you're quiet, he'll go away.
Yeah. You're always going to find that at the pub.
Yeah.
So find wacky characters.
Yeah.
You go further out west, you're finding some more colourful characters that are there all the time. You hear all their wacky names and stories. It's lovely. I think, probably the funniest area to go to, Liverpool. Some really interesting people there. Intelligent people too. It's quite often in the social television, but some very interesting people that live in those areas. I remember doing my journalism course. Yeah, no, he was a good bloke. Very colourful character.
Yeah.
He took it from the perspective of someone who wasn't like fully trained in that industry and just wanted to have fun, which I think was the right approach. Oh, to a certain extent, but like experimental cinema and movies is fun to work with.
Yeah.
That lady will lead a nation. We'll bring Australia to greatness.
Oh, I've got to send you this video. Have you heard of a comedian called Tim Dillon?
Yeah, sounds very familiar.
Oh, you've probably seen photos of him.
Aussie?
American. But he's done his own take on like motivational talks.
Oh, okay.
It's so fucking
really
funny.
Good? Okay. Yeah, no, name sounds very familiar.
So
I keep thinking it's the guy from books, but no, that's Dylan Moran.
Yeah, that's it. He did a skit on Gary Vee.
Nice. Yeah, it goes like to I saw one where he was like at a garage sale. This was the parody of the Gary Vee video. There's this one guy who was doing a parody of going to a garage sale. Going, see this? It's garbage worth $50. This $50. He goes, I'll get that, thank you. I'll get that, thank you. I'll steal that, thank you. And he's like grabbing all this stuff from the garage, and the guy's like, what are you doing? And I was like, no, get out of my way. Yeah, I don't know. Those motivational speakers kind of put me off a bit. Like, they say have some logical sense, but so many of them just look like losers who have good videographers and just feel like, oh yeah, just talk a bunch of shit, the stuff that they don't really implement into their own life. Yeah, very kind of false kind of industry.
That's what
Someone like Gary Vee, for example, right?
That's what Tim did. He did a skit and he had like a shot of Gary Vee going, you can say it, but I highly recommend you.
Because you're starting to see a generation of people who are just obsessed with this freaking motivation mindset thing, which, again, there are some positives to take out of it for sure, like the whole element of, yes, don't work for this and work for yourself kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you find a lot of these motivational speakers. I'm not talking about Gary Vee. I think Gary Vee has some logical points to make and has probably helped, thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah.
But I also think, that some of them are just real. They're just so false and don't have any form of like
business education. Right?
Yeah, no, not at all. And they're just kind of talking out their arse. There's a whole range of them too. It's a big rabbit hole. Deep rabbit hole of those kind of motivational speakers.
What if there's an iceberg video on it?
What's it?
An iceberg video?
Yeah, it's kind of I mean, it's shocking to me how many people, are motivated by like Andrew Tate and people like that. I'm just like, it's quite clear to me someone like Andrew Tate is just someone who has a lot of money and he was able to afford a lot of videos to record a lot of what he does. And a lot of it's staged. A lot of it is staged. He just has the money to record all this footage. And to present this life of like luxury and fame, when it's probably a boring as shit life that he lives. I do find it funny the Top G comment about Andrew Tate though. Top G.
Yeah.
Top G. Andrew Tate, the Top G.
So moving this way.
One interesting thing about it though, I will say, is it's definitely a clear sign of people kind of getting lost in this kind of society. Just, the not talks. Just clearly a sign of just the shit that's hitting the fan at the moment, and people realizing that there's a lot of money in, talking about, motivational speaking. It's always existed, you've had your Alan Watts, you've had your, all those kind of speakers. It's really blown up now. Quite a clear sign of the times that we live in.
Yeah. I like listening to you.
Also, just people wanting to be rewarded with the money, monetary reward, being a motivational speaker.
It's cool if you actually learn stuff from them.
God, yeah. No, and again, people like Gary Vee, I don't diss at all. Like, I think they have worked hard, and some of it is quite motivational and quite accurate.
Yeah.
But as a result, it's also built a subculture of TikTok creators and people who really think they're more important than they actually. I'm sorry, I'm not going to get my motivational kind of video from someone like Logan Paul, even though Logan Paul is very successful. He's a dropkick. Like, I'm sorry, I have no interest in living the life of Logan Paul.
Shia
listening to what he has to say.
Shia LaBeouf had a funny one.
Which one, sorry?
What's his name? Shia LaBeouf or?
Shia LaBeouf? Who's that? I don't know who that is.
Oh, that Transformers guy.
Shia LaBeouf. Yeah. Yeah, just do it! Yeah. Shia LaBeouf, yeah, he's a funny one. Interesting motivational talk he did. Just do it!
Yeah.
Make your dreams come true!
We can walk down this way.
Just around here?
And we'll bear left.
Yeah. I've never been here, actually.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
I think this is an old cruising spot when I was a kid.
Oh, what's that?
An old cruising spot.
Oh, really? Yeah. It looks it. At night time,
Yeah.
perfect for it. also it's near a few universities, and yeah, definitely actually near high schools.
Yeah. I saw this one kid up video. It's called the channel's name is Action the Kid.
Oh yeah.
And he was walking through Manhattan Park at night. It was spooky.
Oh really?
He would just come across like random on the street.
New
and
York
you hear voices in the background. Yo, turn off that fucking light. And it's his camera light and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's such a huge. Are you talking about like Central Park?
Yeah, Central Park.
Yeah. Central's such a big place. Though.
Yeah.
It's like its own suburb.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd meet some really wacky characters in there. Because obviously it's a big place full of homelessness as well. Yeah, some very interesting people that you coming from Central Park. Also, New York is definitely a very odd place for people.
Yeah, it's such a small space, but it's so like
so
big at the
many
same time.
people and such a wide range of people too.
Yeah.
In life, like the super poor to the super rich.
Yeah.
So it's similar to Sydney in a way.
Yeah. It's good. That's one thing I do like about Sydney is that you go to one area, it's different from one another.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's a good blend of cultures. It's like Lebanese, one's Thai, or
here
Korean.
is so different from out west.
Oh yeah, like this is completely different to like completely different to Stratfield, which is heavily Korean and Chinese. Yeah, very much. Yeah, just a very different vibe.
You want to do any last thing?